What is poppin', residents of the Master Clan? This is your boy sixmysta man coming at y'all with a brand new video. So this is the start to what if Naruto and Hinata got together early, and this is gonna hopefully be along with a series on the channel. And yeah, if you want to see this series continue, make sure to like, subscribe, and spam something in the comments to get my attention. It really helps with the YouTube algorithm. Also, this is a series edited by our beautiful editor Steak Uchiha, and our intros and outros are created by the Dragon Lord. Check out all my socials, link in the description, and yeah, let's get into this. So, we start off with the young Naruto seeing a purple-haired girl, or bluish-haired girl if you really want to, get bullied by some bigger children. They were shouting insults like white-eyed freak and similar other insults. Naruto would run in only to get beaten up by said bullies, and the girl would just stand there, pretty confused. She'd be like, why did you help me if you were just gonna get hurt yourself? Naruto would smile and say, "'Cause that's my ninja way. I will become the Hokage and show everyone I'm respectable. My name's Naruto. What's up?" And Hinata would just say, "Huh, interesting. My name's Hinata." She'd help him up because to get this started off, she's not gonna be as shy, but the shyness will peek through a little bit. So, after a small conversation with Naruto and Hinata, they start walking, asking each other questions like Naruto and Hinata would ask each other where their parents are. Naruto would say that he's an orphan. Hinata would say that, well, she is the head of the heir to the Hyuga clan, and she don't know where her guard went. So, Naruto would obviously be like, "Oh, the Hyuga compound? I know where that is. Follow me." He'd lead her there, and on the way there, they'd run into her guard, who obviously starts rumbling around like, "Yo, Lady Hinata, where were you?" They'd get a back and forth, and the guard would, in this one, thank Naruto for saving her. He'd also be a little cautious. He doesn't really want Hinata around her, but he can't really control it. In hopes of getting her to leave him alone, he'd just say, "Lady Hinata, please stay away from that kid." She'd ask him why, and he'd reply with, "He's the Nine Tails." Hinata would have a sudden freeze. She'd look up with a terrified look in her eyes and just speed up her walking. Even though her legs are small, she's going pretty fast. When they get to the Hyuga compound, she sees her father looking at Neji train. Up until this point, Neji has been her inspiration and the one she looked up to. But now she's starting to remember something Naruto said. "I'm going to become Hokage to protect everyone in the village and show them that they should respect me." She thinks, if he's the demon fox, then why does he want to protect everyone? Easy, because he's not. He only holds the demon fox. That doesn't make him it. She puts together in her fragile child brain, and would come to the conclusion that Naruto's not that bad of a kid, and would sometimes convince her guard to let her see Naruto. After a while of him listening into their conversations, he'd realize that Naruto ain't that bad of a kid, and he'd kind of be okay with Hinata being around her. Obviously, if this got to Hiyashi, that would be really bad. One day, Naruto would be out punching a tree when Hinata and her guard got there. She'd obviously ask him what he's doing, and he said he's getting stronger, because shinobi need to be strong. She'd be intrigued. Maybe she should get stronger and then help Naruto get stronger, because he doesn't have a clan. He doesn't really have anyone to help teach him. At this point, they are around 5 and a year away from entering the academy. So, basically, what's gonna happen is Hinata's gonna go back to the Hyuga compound after that day, and actually start taking her training seriously. This would also get rid of the cause of Hiyashi thinking that Hanabi is stronger than Hinata, because Hanabi hasn't yet shown that she is stronger. Hinata would get chakra training down pretty quickly, and would be able to obviously climb up trees. Obviously, this would shortly be followed by water walking, because chakra control is highly regarded within the Hyuga clan. This would also give Neji someone to train with. Hinata has not yet unlocked her Byakugan, but she has grown a lot within her stances in the last few months that she's known Naruto. This is when she'd go back to Naruto for the first time in about a week. She'd basically tell Naruto what she knows, and he would start trying. He wouldn't really know how to channel his chakra, and she'd explain it as a flowing river. Your chakra flows throughout your body like a river and can be interrupted by you bursting out of your chakra points, which basically causes ninjutsu. Naruto would take a while to understand this, but by the end of the day, he had started trying to do a tree climb. He would burst off the tree or slip down it continuously. He'd be a little confused and a little tired, but he decided he'd practice it further. Hinata's guard would tell her that it's time for her to go back to the compound, and they would. This same night is the night that Hinata would get captured, or something similar to that. She would be captured by some cloudnin trying to steal the Hyuga clan's dojutsu. This would be the same night, or the same event that would cause Neji's dad's death. But instead of that happening, what would happen is Naruto would be the one to chase after her. He'd eventually get beaten down by the man, but not give up. He'd burst himself off the floor as he did earlier that day on the tree. Not really on purpose, but more of frustration, trying to gain his speed using chakra and his mind somewhat remembering what Hinata told him. He'd burst towards him, tackling him to the ground just in time for Hiyashi to show up. Hiyashi would question why the Nine-Tails brat is here. This is when Hiyashi would obviously try to smack him away, like, you helped capture my daughter, shit like that. But Hinata's bodyguard would jump in the way. He'd quickly explain that Naruto saved her one day while she snuck out of the compound, and probably did the same here. They've been secretly seeing each other and becoming friends throughout a few last months. Hiyashi would give him a glare, but eventually stand down. They'd take the representative of the Cloud, which is the person that kidnapped her, into custody and take him to the Hokage's office, where Anbu would take him from there. So the entire event of Neji's dad dying would not happen. So in general, Neji would be a more relatable character and would get a lot more work within the series. This is where work would really start happening. For the next month or so, Hinata would be grounded and wouldn't be allowed to go out. Also, Hiyashi just gave her guard a basically scolded her guard and whatsoever. But after this month of her being grounded, Naruto would sneak into the Hyuga compound wanting to see her. Luckily for him, tonight's guard would be Hinata's bodyguard, and he wouldn't really say anything about Naruto sneaking in. By the time Naruto would get to her, Hiyashi and some other Hyuga already knew he was there, and Hiyashi would make his way to outside Hinata's room. He wouldn't barge in because he's really curious to what the Nine-Tails brat wants to do with his daughter. They just have some civil conversation, and Naruto would say that it's been a little lonely without her because, you know, she's his only friend. This would hit Hiyashi with a different curiosity. The kid doesn't seem aggravated at all. So, this would cause Naruto and Hinata to have a conversation and him deciding to leave. But as he decides he's going to leave and come back another day, Hiyashi would open the door. "No need, young Uzumaki. It's okay," he'd say. This is obviously a little odd, but that's not going to matter for long. He'd say that he sees that Naruto has good intentions and would allow him to be with Hinata, to be friends with Hinata, and they could relax in the Hyuga compound, where he could keep an eye over them. This would start off the series with some little confidence. So Naruto and Hinata would have just started up their friendship in public. Usually they would have to hide away in the forest or things similar to that. But now, nearly every day, Naruto would make his way to the Hyuga compound, where people didn't seem to hate him. The only person that seemed to have a dislike towards him was Neji. Even though Neji's father told him to lighten up, Neji was a grumpy kid. That's all I could really say for Neji. While this is occurring, necessarily, Hiyashi would be sitting there looking at Naruto and Hinata. Hinata would take her training from the last week and then sum it up into one lesson and teach it to Naruto. Hiyashi would realize that his daughter is a prodigal genius, along with Neji, two really strong Hyugas in one generation. This is amazing. But Hinata never used to do this. She used to be a slacker. Maybe this Naruto is a good influence. He might even give them some training himself one day. But not for now. he'd go back in and send Hinata's guard out to help with the training, because that's what he has been doing the last few weeks. He has been helping Hinata and Naruto with their training, even though he shouldn't be allowed to. It's been several months and Naruto has finally gotten his water walking done, since he hasn't really been practicing only that. He's even been practicing a version of the Jugen stance that is not used by the main branch, but is something Hinata's guard invented himself. Hinata would take inspiration from this and start making her own adjustment to the stances. And eventually Naruto would want to learn a jutsu. This wouldn't really come in clutch since the Hyuga members don't really use ninjutsu. They're prided on their Jugen stances. So that's not going to come into account till a little bit later. But chakra control is something they got down. I'd say another year would pass and Naruto would get really good with his chakra control, to the point where he could burst chakra from the soles of his hands and fingers to make a similar effect than what the Jugen stance is meant for, which is bursting chakra points. He wouldn't use it in the same sense, as Hinata's guard would have seen that this was not all too effective and would have taught him how to burst it out as a solid blow. So something similar to the air palm, just not as highly scaled. The first day of the academy would begin. Sakura, Ino would have their thing with Sasuke, and Naruto and Hinata would keep to themselves. Sakura and Ino would have just established their rivalry and dominance for Sasuke, and about a week has passed since they started fangirling. After this week has passed, the first official testing of skills would come up. This would obviously be regarded in either ninjutsu, taijutsu, or genjutsu for the shinobi portion. Then an academical test and also a physical exam. The physical exam would just make sure that all the kids are in physically good shape, and the rest is self-explanatory. They'd start off with a ninjutsu portion, which shouldn't really affect any of the kids except the clan kids, who pretty much all use at least one jutsu. With Hinata obviously having chakra control, she'd just climb up a tree because that's their form of the only form of chakra they use, and Naruto would do the same. Iruka, Naruto's current teacher, would not have expected this, but he would accept it. Naruto having someone by his side would also not become a prankster, but he would be a really lonely kid, only having a friend in Hinata. At this point in time, Naruto would be put up against Sasuke for the taijutsu portion, which everyone thought Sasuke would obviously win since Naruto doesn't have a clan or parents, he's an orphan. That's not exactly how it will go. Naruto and Sasuke would start it off with Sasuke being in a speed advantage at least, with Naruto adapting pretty quickly. He not only gained chakra control to climb up trees and walk over water, but he knows how to use his chakra proficiently. He'd use the same concept he used with his hands to launch himself off the floor to give himself a speed boost, and then focus chakra into his hands to create the burst he usually would, putting Sasuke on his ass and out of breath. At this point, the Uchiha clan has not been massacred, so Sasuke is a little nicer. He would begrudgingly stand up and give up because that was a really hard blow. He'd hold his lungs trying to catch his breath, and everyone else would just stand in surprise. They're not really hating on Naruto since he is not a prankster. He hasn't given them a reason to hate him. He's just spent his time with Hinata. So Sasuke would be walking away, but then approached by Naruto like, "Yo, sorry for that, but didn't mean to." Sasuke would say, "No worries," and just walk off. As the day would end, Sasuke would go back to the Uchiha clan building or fucking compound or whatever, and Naruto and Hinata would head back to the Hyuga compound where Naruto would have dinner that night. Hiyashi would ask them how their first tests go, and Hinata would have beaten Sakura, who she was putting up against, and would have passed all the other portions too, along with Naruto, which at this point would put them in front of the class. Hiyashi obviously took a liking to Naruto within this time, and would have greatly encouraged him to academically and physically do well, because that's needed for a great shinobi. As Naruto would also have taken a liking to Hiyashi, who is one of the smarter people on the council. He'd explained that even though he is a council member and a noble, he is still one of the least highly classified jonin, if not a highly classified Anbu. But Naruto would just shrug it off. He'd say that, "Yeah, but you need jutsu to become Hokage, and now that I'm in the academy, I can finally learn some of those." Hiyashi would laugh and say, "You don't need to, you have the Jugen stance." And they'd eat their food to the sunset. So, last time we left off, we got into the academy and ended off with the Uchiha Massacre, which would have put Sasuke out of place and starting his emo phases. With Naruto and Hinata though, they would continue their training under the Hyuga and also start adapting to their training in the academy. I'm not gonna go over the entire academy day for day, I'm more or less just going to run over what would happen. First, they'd start off with their basic combat training, which Naruto and Hinata would already have down, so they'd just prefer to stick to their Jugen stances and improve on that. Also, I'm going to go over the jutsu that they will learn. So they'd obviously learn the clone jutsu, which Naruto actually would get down in this one since he has impeccable chakra control due to training with the Hyugas, which, to be honest, for their style of fighting, you basically need good chakra control. And also the kunai clone jutsu, the shuriken clone jutsu, which they would adapt from Sasuke and not from Iruka actually, which is somewhat a form of shadow clone, but not exactly. Also, they learn the transformation jutsu, which isn't going to lead to the sexy jutsu as it does in canon, so that's going to be a little difference. Also, people wouldn't despise Naruto for him being a prankster, so people in the academy wouldn't hate him per se, they'd just be curious about him. A lot of the kids' parents would tell them to stay away from Naruto, but more of the clan kids wouldn't be told the same thing, since their parents, to be frank, don't really care. So, Naruto and Hinata would mostly mind their own business due to Hinata being somewhat shy and not wanting to interact with everyone, but being comfortable around Naruto. On the other hand, another person that they spend a lot of time with is Shino. He seems to be a loner and not really interact with anyone, where Shikamaru and Choji would mind their own business and Kiba being too outgoing to really be friends with anyone. So Shino, Hinata, and Naruto would more or less be their own little group. Sasuke would always be off doing his own thing, and Sakura and Ino would always be following him. To be frank, they're not going to be the top students. Hiyashi being there, Naruto and Hinata both having drive, they'd more or less be put to the point where Naruto and Hinata would be the top students in the class, and then Sasuke and Sakura being underneath them, with Sasuke even at some point giving up on the academical portion due to favoring training. So, basically, I'm going to try and just go over everything in the academy right now. Some progression would happen, people would accept Naruto and Hinata, not really interacting with them all too much, but Naruto and Hinata growing steadily, but their growth is stunned a little bit because of being limited by the academy. The day of the final exams come, and everyone is there except one person. This would be Sasuke. He'd come as the last exam is being thrown, which is the clone jutsu. Naruto and Hinata would both have 10 perfect clones, Sakura have 2, Sasuke have 5 in this one because he wouldn't really practice that the clone jutsu all too much, and things will happen. So, Mizuki would be like, you all have passed for now, and then look at Sasuke like really disappointing, because, you know, Sasuke is supposed to be the Uchiha, and Mizuki hates Naruto, so he should have been first, but Sasuke actually got the least amount of points since he missed half of the exam, but he does pass by the skin on his teeth. Naruto and Hinata would go to celebrate with the Hyuga clan, and the next day, Naruto would decide to go eat some ramen early in the morning after waking up. This is when he'd be introduced, or basically encountered by Mitsuki, which he'd just start some conversation. He never actually straight up showed Naruto that he disliked him in the academy this time, and would say like, "Yo, Naruto, did you know that there's a way you could become a Chunin off the bat?" Naruto, wanting to impress the people that are in his life like Hinata and Hiyashi, he'd immediately go like, "Yeah, what can I do?" He'd explain that there is a test, which are usually only told to you in the Chunin exams, but what you need to do is steal a scroll out of a heavily guarded place within the Hokage Manor. It's one of the most difficult tasks a shinobi can complete. That's why they'd be given the rank Chunin. And also within that scroll is an enlistment of jutsu, which you can learn one of.
Naruto would smirk and obviously say, "Well damn, guess I'm gonna be a Chunin then." Mitsuki would be off after giving Naruto all the information he needs, and Naruto would that night proceed to steal the scroll of sealing. Everyone will be after him without him knowing, and things lead to things. Naruto would learn the Shadow Clone and Multi-Shadow Clone Jutsu, getting them down straight away, and then would learn something else. This is a forbidden Hyuga technique, or not really forbidden, but it's highly suggested to not using it, and this would be the Air Palm. I'm going to put the Air Palm in here so that Naruto has another jutsu to learn instead of just the Shadow Clone. He would learn the Multi-Shadow Clone, but he's not necessarily going to use it all that often, and when he does, he'd only create around 10 clones. So Naruto, being smarter, would also read up on the fact that you retain any whatsoever consciousness of whatever your Shadow Clone does, and would keep this in mind, since this would be good for stealth and things like that. He decided he'd test it out as soon as he got his Chunin rank, when Iruka would appear scolding him, which would be followed by Mitsuki appearing. Things would lead to things. Naruto, being scared, would try and run away, and Iruka would eventually take the hit for him, where Naruto would become enraged. Mitsuki would drop down and be like, "Naruto, now you're gonna die. You're the Nine Tails." And Naruto would just smirk. "I know I'm the Nine Tails. I know I'm a monster. The Hyuga clan told me that a long time ago. But they accepted me either way. And now I'll show you why they're the strongest clan in the Leaf." Naruto would take his Jugen stance, but before he does, he creates 10 exact clones, who all surround Mitsuki within the Jugen stance. Mitsuki would say, "Clones won't help you, not even if they were Shadow Clones. You're a mere Genin." Naruto would say, "With the help of a forbidden Hyuga jutsu, I'll show you." He'd push chakra into his hands, similar to what he remembers happening with his feet back when he saved Hinata when they were kids. It would burst out as much chakra as possible, creating somewhat of a shockwave or a wind blast. All 10 directions coming, or from 10 different directions. These wind blasts coming towards Mitsuki, it would hit him. First time it would hurt a lot, but it wouldn't deal too much damage. Naruto would bite on his lip. This is bad. But as Mitsuki moves forward, the clones hit him again. Naruto sees what his clones see, and they just continue hitting him until he can physically not move any longer. They basically stun him with an air palm, continuously, basically putting him in the hospital. Shortly after Iruka ended scolding Naruto, even though he was pretty injured, people from the Hyuga clan would arrive, since they knew Naruto would not do this, being Hiyashi, Hinata's guardian Hinata, even Neji. Neji in this one would be somewhat friends with Naruto, but wouldn't train with him all that often, since Neji would rather keep to himself and train with Hanabi, who he sees as a more appropriate partner, since Naruto is stronger than Hinata, and the two of them train together all the time. So this would be the most beneficial. Neji would just smirk and ask Naruto how he could possibly beat a Chunin, and Naruto would show off his new technique. He'd fling his air palm towards a tree, scarring it on all directions and even destroying the bark on it, which would not only impress Hiyashi but Neji too. Hiyashi would say that, "Naruto, that's a forbidden Hyuga technique. Not because of its deadliness or anything like that, but because of its pure amount of chakra consumption. The fact that you learned that in one day is impressive." Naruto would explain to Hiyashi that it comes more or less from what he did to save Hinata when they were kids. Hiyashi would say, "I wondered what that why the bark was destroyed on that tree that night. But whatever, I trust you, Naruto." Neji would obviously have a new Hyuga jutsu to learn. Even though he already has the rotation down, Naruto cannot really do the rotation per se. And Hinata has been working on her own jutsu. It requires a little more fragility, but it will get there at some point. The three of them would then head back to the Hyuga compound, where they'd celebrate, and the whole thing with Mitsuki would be resolved by the Anbu. So a week would go by, and they'd be sat down to see who their senseis would be. It would go more or less the same, with Kakashi being assigned as the team's sensei, and he'd call them up to the roof after being a few hours late. Team 7 in this case would be Naruto, Hinata, and Sasuke, or which would be known as the Leaf Village Tactical Attack Force Squad within this one. Since Sasuke had the lowest scores and Naruto and Hinata had the highest, they would automatically be paired by Iruka's words, and even though these groups, or this entire group, was requested by Kakashi. So, for now, Sakura is going to take Hinata's place on Shino and Kiba squad, because there's no real point in having a team full of censors, and she'd be put on the route of Genjutsu. I'm not really going to focus on Sakura all that much until we get to the tuning exams. So, for now, obviously everyone would go through, and Naruto would say that his dream is to become Hokage and represent as the first person out of the Hyuga clan to become a Hokage. Even though he's not a Hyuga, they happily consider him as one. And that's what he meant. Kakashi would just say okay and continue to Hinata, who'd say that she wants to become strong for the person and people that she loves. She'd look at Naruto and start to blush. Kakashi would have a little giggle under his mask since the boy Naruto be doing good. And he would look over to Sasuke, the emo fuck which is Sasuke. He'd say in Uchiha, Sasuke would have the rant about him killing Itachi and all that bullshit that he originally did. And it would end off with Kakashi basically telling them what he did in canon. Now that the emo boy is done, let's move on. In the morning, meet me at this time, don't eat because you'll puke, blah blah blah. They'd arrive and things would lead to things, and Kakashi would eventually arrive hours late. Naruto and Hinata minded their own business, practically ignoring Sasuke, which he didn't really care because he didn't really want to be bothered by them. And Kakashi would start their exam. Like, what much can you do? All of them would jump back with Naruto and Hinata landing around the same place so that they could coordinate. Even if this test could only let 2 people pass, they'd make sure it's them. So, because this is a Jonin, they'd have to work together to make that happen. But before they could leap out, they see that Sasuke had already went, when Naruto has an idea. He'll jump in and help Sasuke to mid-range, while Hinata tries to grab the bell while Kakashi's distracted. Hinata would agree, and thus it will continue. Sasuke would obviously throw a fireball at Kakashi, which he'd use the substitution jutsu to get in a tree. At this point, a Naruto clone behind Kakashi would throw an air palm at him, which this was unexpected because they wanted to ambush him, but it works. Kakashi dives out of the trees to be surrounded by a few Naruto clones and Sasuke. Sasuke would say that he doesn't need Naruto's help, but whatever, launching yet another fireball, which was this time compressed from all directions, even above, by Naruto and his clones with the air palm. Kakashi would seemingly disappear, and the next second Sasuke would be pulled underground. Naruto knows he just used the jutsu, but which one? He used the headhunter jutsu to get not only out of the way of the fireball and all the air palms, but to grab Sasuke and neutralize one of his opponents. As Kakashi comes out of the ground, Naruto and his clones would be ready to fight. Kakashi would say that fighting single-handedly would not help him, since, Kakashi is a Jonin. But at this point, Naruto is overwhelming Kakashi with the Jugen stance, and Hinata would make a leap for the bells. They'd miss, and as Kakashi said it, they couldn't get the bells. One of them is going to get tied up. But Hinata did grab the bells, that's the thing. Naruto had taught her how to make one singular shadow clone this past week, which actually helped them a lot, since this clone was the last second able to grab a bell off Kakashi, but not just one, 2 bells, which she would give to Naruto. Kakashi would leap off after tying Sasuke to the pole and telling Naruto and Hinata to eat. They'd realize that Sasuke is hungry and eventually feed him after some back and forth banter between the group, and Kakashi would leap out saying that not only did they use involuntary teamwork, which means they just naturally work together, but they showed that they could be a team even though he told them not to be one, which means that failing the mission makes you scum, but failing your friends make you worse than scum. That's what he'd tell them and would pass them. He'd tell them that training and missions would start tomorrow, and
Last time we left off with Naruto and Hinata and Sasuke finally becoming Team 7. So Team 7 per se is the tactical attack force, which consists of a close range fighter being Hinata, a mid to close range fighter being Naruto, and a long to close range fighter being Sasuke, being able to have that as their main focuses around time. And yeah, so this time we're not really going to go into the 1 month training period they had. Instead, we're going to go into the following arc. I'm going to have some things happen within that training time, with Kakashi obviously teaching Sasuke things like water and tree walking, which I really always want to speed up, and Naruto and Hinata just practicing their hand-to-hand or taijutsu per se, with Naruto obviously using the Shadow Clone to speed up progression. He would not know the Shadow Clone trick per se yet, because I don't want to make him too OP from the start, but he does usually make around 3 to 10 Shadow Clones when fighting. Sure, they're not as effective as they were in canon due to how he fights, not as recklessly, but in a more stable fighting position. Sure, it gives him some sort of an advantage when it comes to Shadow Clones, but it could also be predicted, unlike how he fought in canon. So, we're going to start off with them completing their missions for the month, and all of them being adamant to go 1-up. For Naruto, this is because he really wants to prove himself, same for Sasuke. But for Hinata, it's more of her confidence is finally there, and she wants to keep growing. So she would also pitch in, and Kakashi would believe they're more than ready. So by the time that they get to the Hokage's office, Kakashi would be like, yo, I think my team deserves a better mission. Hiruzen would accept it and would call in Tazuna. Obviously, Iruka would be kind of skeptical, and Kakashi would say that, Iruka, we both know I'm the best Jonin in the leaf. So if I were you, I'd just mind my own business. Obviously not in that exact words, but something along those lines. And as this continues, we'd obviously have Tazuna come in and be like, yo, insulting everyone. And as he's about to insult the girl with the pale eyes, Naruto's like, don't even try it. You can insult me and my friend over here, but if you insult her, I will literally remove your testicles from your body. So this obviously makes him gulp, but whatever, he's drunken anyway. So an hour till they need to meet up. Naruto would say he'd go to his place, Hinata goes to her place, and Sasuke would do whatever the hell Sasuke does. So we'd go for them meeting back up, at least Sasuke being there already because he's a loner, he don't really know much. Hinata and Naruto getting their stuff. Naruto, after getting his stuff, popped by the Hyuga compound to get some shinobi tools, because they do really allow Naruto to do most things there, because to them, Naruto is a part of the Hyuga clan at this point. Hiyashi would ask Hinata, is this her first C rank? And Naruto would be there like, yeah, don't worry about it, Pops. I'll take care of her. And when it comes to saying Pops, the thing is, it's more like Hiyashi being his father figure and not the kind of Pops y'all thinking about, but whatever. We'd move on to them traveling, and Hinata constantly keeping her Byakugan open as training for herself, and Naruto and Sasuke kind of just walking, because why not? Eventually, when they do get to the puddle, Hinata would point out that that's a genjutsu, and she can see 2 people standing right there. Naruto and Sasuke would engage. The 2 demon brothers obviously trying to kill Kakashi, but it wouldn't work. Sasuke would catch the one with the foot right to the chin, and Naruto the other to a palm strike enhanced by chakra to the stomach. As both of them go flying back, Naruto would push 2 more air palms out, having them fly and wrap themselves basically around the tree by the chain. Obviously, they just let the chain go, because that's something they can do, to separately fight Naruto and Sasuke. But the demon brothers are more tuning for their teamwork and not necessarily for their pure power. So Naruto obviously making 3 clones, and Sasuke just throwing around a bunch of jutsu, like the Flower Phoenix jutsu or the Fireball jutsu, to basically trap his opponent and eventually just hit him. Naruto would make his 3 clones and just hit his opponent with air palms continuously, to where his opponent would finally jump up, and Naruto sees his opportunity with another clone coming from on top, as basically the 4 from the bottom boost each other up and then kind of hit him as they're going up, but the last one kicking him all the way down to the floor, kind of knocking him out. All
all five clones in this case would disband to reveal the real Naruto's been standing next to Hinata all along, just to make sure that she's okay, since even though they haven't gotten together yet, the casual love for each other is there. I just like to point out, and this part's finally where we are going to get into that. But yeah, Kakashi would question Tazuna, and the team would agree to go on as long as Tazuna agrees to pay the rest as soon as the Land of Waves are back on their feet, and they would continue. Kakashi would obviously send his dogs back and tell the third Hokage about it, and have Anbu come collect these two, which they just encaptivated onto the tree, and they'd leave. Unbeknown to them, after they got there, or after they left, a girl or a boy in a mask would appear and then kill the two demon brothers and be off. The Anbu would later find the two dead demon brothers and would think that Kakashi killed them and just shrug it off, while Kakashi, Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata would be traveling across the giant river/ocean, or whatever the hell that is, lake, I don't know, to get to the Land of Waves, and they're told to be quiet as usual, with Naruto and Sasuke arguing, but no one really cares. When they get there, Hinata with her with her Byakugan active would just scream, "Duck!" As they duck, a giant sword comes flinging over them, with Hinata tackling Naruto to the ground just to make sure he's safe. She kind of land on top of him as they stare into each other's eyes romantically, and she obviously begins frantically blushing and then jumping up, falling on her butt after she does. Naruto would help her up. It's a cute little exchange when Zabuza would land on his sword, and Kakashi would say, "No time for you two lovebirds, get into formation." Hinata, Naruto, and Sasuke would all surround the bridge builder Tazuna, with Kakashi at the front. Kakashi would say, "Zabuza Momochi, Demon of the Mist," as he pulls down his basically his mouth cover to reveal his Sharingan, and Zabuza standing there. "Oh, what a surprise! Kakashi of the Sharingan. It's an honor to meet you." Hashtag Daddy Kakashi, Mr. Worldwide. Yeah, everyone knows Kakashi, let's go. But yeah, we'd have that small altercation, and the fight would go as normal. By the time that Kakashi would get captured, it wouldn't go necessarily how it would go, with Zabuza still making the clone. But as the clone attacks, it would easily be handled by a combination of Naruto and Hinata, and their perfect teamwork when it comes to the Jugen stance. They'd be able to take him out and put the clone out. Zabuza, being a little more cautious, would create two more clones. And Sasuke would obviously go in throwing a fireball jutsu, which was blocked by one of the two clones that now guard him, while Naruto has an idea. He'd basically create multiple shadow clones, sending them out while him and Hinata try to get as close as possible. Obviously, Zabuza would figure this out, and as Naruto would come up from the water, sneaky little rascal, with Air Palm, about to basically break Zabuza's arm with that pure amount of chakra. That's how Zabuza noticed Naruto is emanating too much chakra, so he'd use the basically rolling log technique, or the substitution jutsu, to be able to switch with the log, and yeah, or not with the log, in this case it was a clone. The clone would get destroyed, Kakashi would be freed, and the intercation would go as in canon, with Kakashi getting Zabuza really injured, and Naruto and Hinata stepping in every now and then. Sasuke throwing the occasional Phoenix Flower jutsu, because that's a lot better than the fireball. It's a lot more controlled, and you can attach chakra strings to it to manipulate where it goes, which Sasuke isn't going to do, by the way. It's just, I'd like to point that out. So Haku would eventually dive in, throwing him with a Senbon, and as Kakashi falls down after Haku left, they'd have to take Kakashi to Tazuna's house, and Kakashi be like, "Oh shit, that wasn't a hunter nin. They're supposed to kill him on the spot." This would get the entire group in a hustle, and they're just trying to get to Tazuna's place. When they eventually get there, they would sit down to eat, where Naruto would encounter Inari. Instead of Inari having Inari would be the same, but Naruto's reply wouldn't be the same. Naruto would somewhat explain that he had no family. He was lonely until he met Hinata.
and his new family became her family, and now that's what he needs to protect. Obviously, Inari would still throw his tantrum because, you have a family type of bullshit, even though Inari has a family. And that would still kind of create that situation as it did in canon, with them deciding that they have to go. Naruto and Hinata would sit outside having one of their casual conversations where they just talk about how they're feeling, because this is kind of the relationship they have right now, where they are each other's getaway from everything that's happening. Naruto obviously being a little furious that this little twerp is taking the people he has for granted, and Inari being pissed that Naruto thinks they're the same, shit like that, because, Inari's a swell piece of shit. Hinata would calm Naruto down, and they'd eventually go in and just sleep. The next day would just be a bunch of Hinata and Naruto helping Inari, with Sasuke just running around throwing shuriken because training, blah blah blah. But yeah, that day would also not be productive. But around the middle of that day, Kakashi would wake up to try and help them do something. So the training is going to be a lot different, since the entire group knows the basics of water and tree walking, which is the basics of chakra control. All of them have pretty good taijutsu, and he doesn't really know what to teach them per se. So what he decides to teach them is some more formation, but after a few hours of that, the team be like, yo, we already got these formations down. We've been doing this all month. Can we please move on to something else? So, as I usually do, he'd actually, instead of teaching them the body flicker as I usually do, he's going to teach them the substitution jutsu, because I don't want to make them too OP out the start, and the body flicker is pretty much a really OP jutsu. So, he's going to be teaching them, for once, and the only time ever, the substitution jutsu. I feel that Hinata would get this down pretty easy because of her Byakugan and Chakra Control, because he would hide the log random so that they could sense the log. Because if you don't know, for my what ifs, I usually go by legacy standards, and what would necessarily happen is they would have to put a chakra seal on the log to be able to switch with it. So somewhat of a summoning seal per se. Which means Kakashi would not only have to teach them how to create the summoning seal in this case, but also how to channel your chakra to activate a seal, which you keep either in your pouch or on your body, which is kind of like a once-off seal so that you can't really abuse it. So after you use the jutsu, both seals just vaporize. So quick fix, you can just create multiple, but it would be hard to manage in your head with the amount of chakra control they currently possess. So they're not going to have to abuse it, but at least they know the basics. So obviously the white rabbit they found earlier, which I didn't really mention, that goes to canon. Naruto would obviously throw a kunai into the bush to the white rabbit, which turns out is just a white rabbit, and Hinata would be like, Naruto, you should not have done that. Cute little rabbit. And Naruto would apologize, shit like that. But obviously this was a substitution jutsu for Zabuza if he needed it. And I just say Naruto didn't notice the substitution seal. So this would go on, and eventually at the end of the week, Naruto and Sasuke would eventually be able to master this technique and able to actually do it. Sure, this takes a lot of chakra on Sasuke's end and a lot of concentration on Naruto's, but they will get it down. The encounter between them at the bridge, now that Kakashi is healed up, would still occur, with Zabuza and Haku there waiting for him. Naruto would not have had the same altercation with Haku. It would kind of have gone differently. When she found him there, he would not have been knocked out. He'd just been sitting there, so she wouldn't take the chance of pulling out a kunai or something to try and kill him. She just approached him like, yo, what's up? And Naruto would just be like, nah, just training. And it would just be more civil conversation, not really the over-sexualized trap thing that happened in canon, which most people over-sexualize for some apparent reason. But whatever. We get to the altercation between them, with Haku needing to take care of basically the genin, being Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata, with Naruto and Hinata being the ones to take charge, seeing as Kakashi thought that Sasuke would be the most capable of guarding Tazuna. So just as the ice mirrors is going to happen, Naruto would shove Hinata out, with Sasuke knowing that Naruto wouldn't be able to take care of it himself. He told Hinata to lay back. She decides to go protect the bridge builder while Sasuke actually rushes into the mirrors, which then he would not be able to come out of because of Haku. we'd have a similar thing go on in canon, but with Naruto actually landing a few blows on a Haku with the air palm, and sometimes even just a Jugen blast, which is just chakra going directly from your hand into someone else's body, kind of stunning some of Haku's muscles instead of her chakra points, or his chakra points, since Naruto doesn't actually precisely know where the chakra points are, because it could kind of differ depending on someone's body size and shape, all that type of stuff. Plus, Naruto thinking it was a girl would also mess that up, kind of, but whatever. Naruto would eventually get hit a few times, and Sasuke would jump in front of him, not really knowing why he does so, but he jumps in front of Naruto, having Naruto go out in a rage. Sasuke in this time would obviously have unlocked his Sharingan and been able to dodge quite a few of the blows, but as he sees a partial prediction of the future, with Naruto getting hit straight in the chest or in the heart, his heart would stop and he'd die. Sasuke would dive in front of him, getting critically injured but not enough to actually die. He'd pass out. Having Naruto think that he is dead, Naruto would go out in a rage. Sure, they didn't have the intercation that made them close in canon, but this is kind of gonna replace that moment, with Naruto seeing that Sasuke was willing to give his life for him, even though they weren't friends, they barely even talked, they didn't really like each other. He would rage out. He would start getting a red aura around him. No tails, it's just the normal red aura with only barely of the 9 tails chakra leaking. He'd get his scars or his whisker marks would increase in thickness, and his eyes would go red. He'd start screaming, and as his chakra just pours out, he would push his arms out, sending chakra from every piece of his body, shattering the mirrors, having Haku jump out only to be hit by him from every angle. As he travels at unseeing speeds, Haku could not understand this. But as he goes around her, he hits her with air palms, Jugen strikes, everything you could imagine, putting Haku in the worst condition he could possibly be. But as Naruto was about to land the final blow, Haku heard something. It was a whistle. I know I have a dyslexic whistle, but whatever. He'd hear a whistle. And then he'd use his last trick. He'd disappear from Naruto's sight as Naruto would frantically look around to see him in front of Zabuza. Zabuza and Kakashi had been fighting all along, with Kakashi eventually being able to pull off a summoning dog, or his dog summonings, to keep Zabuza in place as he was about to strike him with a lightning blade. As this was about to happen, Haku jumped in front of, or somewhat teleported in front of Zabuza, tanking the Chidori, dying. As this happens, a new group would appear. This would appear as the mist starts going away. This would obviously be Gato and his goons. So we'd still get the altercation of Zabuza wanting to fight, being in a little worse condition because of the first altercation. He'd just be out for Gato and not entirely of the entirety of his crew. And eventually, when he does kill Gato, which he does, Naruto, Sasuke, and Naruto and Hinata in this case would have to take care of the rest of the thugs. And Naruto finally discovering that he can use the 9 tails power for some reason, with Hinata pointing it out since she used her Byakugan to keep an eye inside of the thing, and she'd point out that he was growing ears and a tail. It didn't fully manifest, but it was growing. And this would obviously make Naruto think of the 9 tails fox. So about a week would pass and they would head back to the Leaf after the bridge was finished, and Naruto would have still given the speech he did, inspired everyone, and this would cause the bridge to be called the Great Naruto Bridge. That's not really going to change. Inari would apologize to Naruto. They defeated the person that killed his father, even though it's not his father, but whatever. They'd go home, and on the way there, Hinata would basically say that she was worried about Naruto. Naruto would start blushing and tell her not to really worry, and they'd continue back to the Leaf. Just as they were about to enter the gates of the Leaf, Naruto stopped. Kakashi and Sasuke continued not noticing it, but Hinata would stay back. Kakashi and Sasuke would already be signing back in, but wouldn't really mind Naruto or Hinata since they kind of do their own thing. As they stand there just looking at the entrance to the Leaf, Hinata would ask him, "Naruto, what's wrong?" Naruto would say that this really changed what he thought. Sasuke, someone he barely knows, sacrificed himself for him. And this really made him thought that if he had lost someone like Hinata, he could probably kill countless people with a rage like that. He could go full nine tails. This is when Hinata would finally make the first move. She'd push forward, slightly having her lips touch his. In a romantic and passionate kiss, she'd say, "Don't worry, Naruto. I'll never leave you." Naruto would obviously turn bright red, and soon after Hinata as well, being kind of a weird altercation, them heading back into the leaf, kind of not really talking no more. And when they get to the Hyuga compound to tell Hiyashi what happened, Kakashi would obviously fill in the mission report because he's the sensei, it's kind of his job. They'd explain to Hiyashi how it went, and Hiyashi would obviously look at both of them red-faced and be like, "You two kissed, didn't you?" This would cause an entirely different reaction. They'd both just go pale. And this more than confirms both Hiyashi and Hinata's old bodyguard suspicion, even Hiyashi's brother or Neji's father, and they just end up laughing because, "Yo, you're finally a couple." And both of them would then stop because they were finally telling them to stop laughing. And they think. This would obviously cause a silence in the room, and Hiyashi was like, "You don't know what you are yet, do you?" They'd look at each other and then just raise their shoulders because what can they really say? Everyone would leave the room for Naruto and Hinata to talk, and after a few minutes of silence, Naruto would finally break the silence. "Hinata, what are we?" Naruto would obviously say, with Hinata kind of mellowing down from her red-faced tomato self and being like, "I don't know, but all I can tell you is I love you, Naruto." And this would obviously cause another moment, one last kiss for this part, and yeah, they'd officially be a couple. But that has been it, guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed. This is... So, last time we left off, Naruto and Hinata had finally had their first kiss and became an official couple. So, we're going to start this off directly after that interaction. Naruto would stand up off of basically Hinata, who he has initiated a kiss with, and just walk away. She doesn't really understand why he's walking away, but he's leaving. She feels a pain in her heart as the tears start falling down her eyes. As Naruto leaves the Hyuga compound, Hiyashi would go into the room to figure out what is going on. Hinata would say that she doesn't know. After her and Naruto kissed, he just left. Hiyashi would tell her to give him time because he does love her, just as everyone else in the Hyuga compound does. So, she just kind of let it go. They have a week until they basically are forced to meet back up. And when they do, Naruto just isn't making eye contact. So, at this point, Kakashi would see that something happened between these two. Maybe they're mad at each other, maybe they got into a fight. And then Sasuke, who is also not looking at either of them, he'd basically call for their attention and throw them each a piece of paper. And he'd explain that they have a week to basically train for the Chunin exams. He's trained them up since their performance in the Land of Waves was beyond adequate. So, after the week, they have to go back to the academy and go to room blah 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 and basically, do the Chunin exams. He believes in them, and yeah, he body flickers away. Sasuke would glare at Naruto, with Naruto just once again looking at the ground as he leaves to go train, obviously. Naruto would also make his way to only be grabbed by Hinata. He'd just whisper, "Hinata, let me go." She'd say, "Not until you tell me what's wrong." He'd then rip his hand out of her arms, making her fall down, looking back with a shocked expression on his face because he didn't mean to hurt her, but he ends up walking away once again. So Hinata is really confused right now, but she's not giving up. She needs to know what she did. She would run and grab Naruto around the waist and then just basically start crying like, "Naruto, what did I do?" This would only result in Naruto to start crying as well. "You didn't do anything, Hinata. But I don't think this is going to work."
The tears intensify and she starts screaming, "Why won't it work? We haven't even tried yet." A few more drops would fall from his face as he said, "Because I'm not worthy of you. You're a princess. You're someone that loves everyone. I'm just someone that intruded on your life, and then this all happened." Hinata would spin him around and give him a slap to the face, having the tears on both of their faces dry up, with Naruto being confused. He's in total shock, his face stretched wide. Hinata, her face looks stern. "No one cares if you're not from our clan. Everyone treats you like one of us. You are one of us, Naruto." Once again, the tears start falling. Naruto just had, once again, a really emotional interaction. He falls to his knees, holding his face, lowering his hands as the tears fall on them. He'd say, "Maybe that's why. You guys shouldn't treat me like one of you because I'm not." Once again, she slaps him. "Look at me. I said you are one of us. We don't care if you're not related by blood. Everyone in the Hyuga clan cares about you." We zoom out to see them training at the Hyuga compound. Looks like they figured things out, as any good couple should. But they're not exactly talking. They're just sparring. They're looking at some Jonin from the Hyuga clan sparring over there, and one of them uses the palm rotation. This brings both Naruto and Hinata to a stop. Neji, being on the opposite side of the fight, just looking as well, would basically jump towards Naruto and Hinata, saying, "Oh, you're looking at the palm rotation too. Too bad neither of y'all will ever be able to master it." They bounce back as they didn't expect Neji to be there, and Naruto and Hinata would divert eye contact from each other and then ask him to elaborate. He'd explained that Hinata doesn't have nearly close to enough chakra to be able to sustain that constant flow of potent rotation chakra, and Naruto, well, he lacks the control. Once again, they ask him, so what can they do about it? Because even though they're considered just as smart as Neji, Neji has more experience when it comes to jutsu. He'd explained that Hinata would be better off just throwing so many suspended, like fucking Jogan strikes through the air that, to create a dome basically, than actually trying to create it, because it would take less chakra and also less precision. For Naruto could just as well burst out his chakra because he has monstrous amounts of that nine-tails chakra. Naruto would nod and then say, "You have a point, but neither of those techniques would be as proficient as the actual palm rotation." Neji would say, "I beg to differ. If you can make it correctly, you can suspend chakra within mid-air, or even create constant needles being shot from your hands in every direction, in the case of Hinata. But for you, Naruto, you could potentially make a chakra field around you that would injure anyone within it except yourself." Then he'd walk away, leaving both of them to think about what he just said, because he has a point. They just continue their training and push it off to next time. So basically, at this point, the week has passed and the group met back up. They're standing in front of the academy and decide to enter. As they get up to the third floor, they see room 401, the room they're supposed to be on, and outside is two Chunin basically refusing for this kid in green to go in. Hinata and Naruto both know who this is. This is the infamous Rock Lee. He is on Neji's team, and even though Neji has never admitted to his face, Neji sees Lee as a rival, someone who is really powerful, but he always keeps up a dapper and strong appearance to push his rival further. Also, there is Tenten, and Neji, obviously. So, after the kid gets pushed to the ground, Naruto would just look at Sasuke along with Hinata, and they just nod and then just continue walking, since this is the wrong room. They're supposed to be on the 4th floor and not on the 3rd floor like they are, so it's a genjutsu. As they walk past, Naruto fires through some hand signs and says, Absolute Chakra Burst, Genjutsu Expansion, which basically disperses the Genjutsu and expands it to other people within the area, but not people within it. So basically what it does is it puts the jutsu on the people that cast it instead of the ones that are currently afflicted by it. So the Chunin, who were actually the gate guards, would transform out of their henge and say, Hey Naruto, you weren't supposed to do that. Everyone would start walking to the third room after Naruto explains that it was just a genjutsu, and he'd say that maybe it shouldn't be so easy to throw actual Chunin out of their genjutsu as the team continues walking up. As they continue up the stairs, Rock Lee would grab Sasuke by the arm and say, Sasuke Uchiha, I heard so many great things about your clan and your vision. Maybe you'd be able to keep up with my speed. Neji'd say, Lee, don't bother. Lee would say, No, Neji, I must do this. Even though he was not the Rookie of the Year, he still managed to go through an A-rank jutsu and come out okay. I must test this for myself. Sasuke would go, You know Naruto's stronger than me, right? Even though he thinks that he can become stronger than Naruto pretty soon, because Sasuke still has that little piece of him that is superior to everyone. Lee would say, Yes, I know, but he doesn't possess any dojutsu that can help him keep up. My friend Neji over here has the Byakugan. That's how he stays on my level. Neji would scoff and just look the other way, and Lee would say, Ha! My rival, always so youthful and confident in himself. That's how a rival should be. But now, Sasuke, let us fight! Sasuke would say okay, and they'd proceed to go to an open area. There, basically, what will happen is they'd start their fight and it will go almost exactly to canon. But at the end, instead of Guy's turtle throwing the kunai or Guy throwing the kunai, it would end with Naruto throwing a palm or an air palm at Lee, pushing him off the side, not injuring him, as he lands and a kunai flies beside him, hitting his bandage against the wall. Guy would then basically poof in and go, Lee, that is a forbidden technique. Now, after this exam, you will do 500 laps around the leaf on your hands. Lee would say, Sorry, Guy Sensei. I know it's a forbidden technique, only to be used when you have something to protect. But I couldn't afford to lose. Not against the Uchiha. Guy Sensei would start to tear up. No, Lee, you must respect my wishes. Now, 500 pull-ups right here. Lee would start doing pull-ups, and Naruto would just look at Guy with like, what the fuck just happened? Guy would then basically just appear behind Naruto once again and is like, Naruto Uzumaki, I've heard so much about you from my youthful rival Kakashi. Now, Naruto starts putting it together in his head. This must be Lee's sensei. So, he says, Yeah, what about me? Guy would say that, Kakashi has told me that you are a beast when it comes to fighting, rivaling even a Jonin in your Genin state. I want to fight you one of these days, so win this Chunin exams and become a Chunin. Lee would then say from the sidelines, No, Guy Sensei, I will be the Chunin this year. Once again, Lee and Tenten would just walk away with Guy saying, Let's hope so, Lee. We can do it. As Guy also starts doing pull-ups. If you do not win and become a Chunin this year, we will do 10,000 laps around the leaf on our hands. Yes, Guy Sensei, Lee would say as they just continue their pull-ups. The rest of the team would make it to their room with Naruto laughing at Sasuke saying, Oh, you got beat up by someone that doesn't have any chakra. Sasuke would say like, wait, what? And Naruto would elaborate. He'd say Lee has a chakra network, it's just so inactive that he cannot perform any jutsu or enhance his body with chakra. At least that's what Neji told them. Yet he's still able to beat anyone physically. Sasuke would start rubbing his chin. He had his 2 Tomo Sharingan active that entire fight. Maybe he's going to take Lee's battle methods and use it in his fights. Yeah, that might work. So they make it to the examination room, and I'd say it goes pretty much to canon with Naruto not being able to figure out any of the answers, and Hinata and Sakura in this one would be swapped around. Sakura would be sitting next to Naruto, and he wouldn't even try to peek. He just not write anything with Sakura being like, oh, he's gonna fail. That's what he gets for ranking so high above my Sasuke, because, you know, Sakura's still gonna be a simp. So, Sasuke does his thing with his Sharingan, copying another person's movement to get it. Hinata would use her Byakugan, and Naruto wouldn't answer anything. When it comes down to the last question, Naruto would stand up and say that he will never give up, because Shinobi should never give up. Like, how could you be a Chunin if you ever give up? Even if I fail this Chunin exams, I will be the strongest Genin. I will be the first Genin Hokage. This inspires some people who would have otherwise given up to stay. Mainly Hinata, because she was actually not wanting to have Naruto and Sasuke fail because of her. So, hearing this gives her the confidence to continue. As he's done with this, Ibiki would throw a smile, but the window next to him would shatter and a banner would pop out with confetti. I am Anko Mitarashi, the sexiest kunoichi in the leaf. Obviously, everyone was just fucking shit-faced, with Naruto even laughing. She'd throw a kunai at him, but he'd have faster reflexes, grabbing it inside of the kunai hole and just throwing it back at her and saying, oh, what was that for? She'd say, don't talk to me like that, brat. If I'm not the sexiest kunoichi in the village, who is? Naruto would then jump out of his seat a few rows backwards as he wraps his arm around Hinata and saying, whoa, the sexiest kunoichi in the leaf is Hinata over here. She'd blush and really start getting red. Her entire body would warm up, and Naruto would notice this, stepping aside and telling her, Hinata, calm down. She'd calm down, and Anko would scoff and say, well, whatever. Follow me, dweebs. I am Anko Mitarashi, the proctor for the second exam, the Forest of Death. They'd all move out so they could start their exam, with Ibiki picking up tests. As he picks up Naruto's, it's just a picture of Naruto he drew of himself, basically pulling his right eye down with his finger and putting his tongue out. Ibiki would scream out, Uzumaki! Anko, you really had to do that, because otherwise Naruto could have actually failed, even though they weren't going to fail anyone as long as they stayed. So, whatever. We skip over to where basically Naruto is talking to Hinata like, you should really not get that shy, like we're boyfriend and girlfriend after all. And once again she starts reading up, but Anko was explaining, so she throws a kunai at him once again. This time it would actually slit his cheek. When a girl from behind Anko appears, or walks up, Anko almost attacks her, but she says, relax, I'm just trying to give you this kunai you threw. She'd say thank you and then appear behind Naruto. I know I fucked up this order, but it sounds cooler. Licking his cheek, basically the blood off his cheek, to only be thrown across the field by a Jugen strike from Hinata. She'd say, oh, kid got some pack behind it. And that's where it would continue, per se. She'd say, whatever. Go sign up, sign the waivers, and we can continue. The teams would go into select boxes together, wherein they would be given a waiver that they must read and then sign, and at that point they must decide which teammate gets the scroll and is told to keep it hidden. Well, Naruto has a different idea. He wants to see how many people he could get to target them. So what he ends up doing is saying he'd keep the scroll, but he says it hard enough for people to hear. He'd give it to Sasuke, but make a clone of the scroll from another scroll he had, and then put it basically in his belt so that people could actually see it. So they'd obviously think that he has the scroll. At this point, they'd go out of the room, and people would immediately start thinking that, okay, he has a white scroll. And after everyone does have their scrolls in, it will be an assortment of white and black scrolls. The white being the moon scroll and the black being the earth scroll. Colors may vary depending on what version of Naruto you watch. So they would prepare to go to the gate they are given and enter it. Naruto would come up with an idea not to enter immediately, and as Anko says enter, he'd show them to wait, create 3 clones, and then have 2 of them transform into Hinata and Sasuke, have them run into the forest. Obviously, as it goes, the water or the rain team were waiting for them, but the actual squad were trailing about 50 yards behind so that they could see the clones but couldn't be seen following the clones. Obviously, at this point, everyone on the team would have switched into black clothing so that it wouldn't be as easy to see them. And as the water team actually starts attacking the clones, all the clones would come out successful, and Naruto would say, "I'd lead them away." The rain team was obviously just there for the scroll, so they'd ignore the Sasuke and Sakura clones as the Naruto clone would run into the forest. After they've made some pace, basically the Naruto clone would turn around and smile as some more Naruto clones come out. The real Naruto had made more clones and had them circle around to block off the area where the other Naruto clone was heading, and as soon as the water getting gained on them, all the clones and the real Naruto, Sasuke, and Sakura would land, or Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata would land there for Naruto and his clones to start throwing air palms. One of the shinobi would be fortunate enough to jump up, but this is something Sasuke has been looking forward to. He'd jump up with the move he saw Lee was about to do. He'd kick the rain getting up, and then appear above him to only kick him downwards. This is called the Lion's Barrage, as he claims, because, we can have stuff happen in a different order. The Genin would hit the ground, and a scroll would pop out from beside him, out of his weapons pouch. Sasuke would catch it, and they'd all start running. The clones would stay there, keeping them in a prison with the wind palms, and as soon as Naruto is far enough away, all his clones dispel. At this point, they are on good way to the tower, about halfway there, and night has just fallen. They would decide to calm down, with Naruto saying that he's going to need to go take a piss, because he feels something. He doesn't actually need to take a piss, but he creates multiple clones and has them surround the trees, and then jumps into one himself. He'd have one clone in himself not lower their presence, but the other clones do. So, when a mysterious snake girl with a kunai on her tongue, or that's what Naruto recognizes her as, comes out of the forest with the giant snake behind her, Naruto says, "I knew it." But the snake would then jump from one side to the other, grabbing one of Naruto's clones and then jumping towards the actual Naruto for it to be shot down with 2 wind palms coming from each hand. As it comes down, Orochimaru would say, "I knew he was there." But the other clones would start dropping and start throwing air palms. Orochimaru would just burst his chakra and have all the clones disperse, with Naruto throwing his scroll, or Naruto showing Hinata to run. Him and Sasuke would handle this. She'd start running, because this has been their plan. If someone stronger than them attacks them, they just need to stall them till one of the teammates gets to the tower. Hinata would jump off and eventually run into Neji and Lee and Tenten, and when they ask where the rest of her team is, she says that she doesn't know. They were fighting against someone with a bigger chakra reserve than Lord Third. Neji's facial expression would change and say, "We need to go help them." They'd start bouncing around, and as they eventually get there, they see a beaten down Naruto in real bad condition, and then Sasuke with the hickey on his neck and also in bad condition. They'd help Hinata carry them to the tower, but they'd have to jump away as obviously they need a scroll, and were actually sleeping through the day so that when the other team started sleeping, they could get a scroll. So they weren't really tired and was able to help Hinata all the way to the tower. Once they get to the tower, Naruto would wake up and ask Hinata where they are, and she'd explain that they're at the tower. Doing this would also basically make it so that the sound group won't interact with them, and even though the water group originally had the same scroll as them, in this one I'm giving them a little layback because, that was kind of a straight up attack. And yeah, a few minutes to about an hour would pass, with Sasuke finally waking up with a purple aura surrounding him, as basically Gaara, Kankura, and Tamari come in. Gaara is surprised that they weren't the first team there. He was 100% sure that they would be. Like, no one he saw had enough bloodlust. But as he looks over, he sees Sasuke with the renewed amount of bloodlust. And Gaara starts smiling. His sand starts rising. But Tamari grabs him on the shoulder. Gaara, not now. You can wait. You can fight him later. Gaara would say that, Tamari, touch me again and I'll kill you. She would back up a little bit, but they'd end up heading in. Iruka would be summoned by Hinata, and it would turn out he's been watching them and they've been there for quite a while. So he does mark them down as the first group to get there, and also marks down the time they got there. He'd help, basically, Hinata take Naruto to a room with Sasuke just limping to his own. And yeah, they'd have to wait a day or two for the rest of the teams to arrive. And basically 2 days pass, and Naruto was still asleep the first two, but a few hours before the last day concluded with the last teams arriving, Naruto would wake up. He'd be in really bad condition, barely having any chakra left, as he holds his head. Like, what happened? And the memories start coming back. As he says what happened, Hinata wakes up and she sees the terrified expression on his face. He basically helped Sasuke kill the girl, but from inside her came out a man. And he did this countless amount of times. They killed him multiple times, yet he kept coming back. That's when it hit him. The guy bit both of them. When he bit Sasuke, Sasuke fell to the ground, but when Naruto was bit, Naruto entered his mindscape. In there, Orochimaru was walking around, but was soon seen by the Nine-Tails, and the Nine-Tails puts out his hand and saying, I'm not planning on sharing a body, as he collapses his hand down on top of Orochimaru. Naruto would say that, oh, what the hell, where am I? How did he take me here? Who are you? As the cage began to glow, Naruto says, you're the Nine-Tails. I'm inside the seal, aren't I? The Nine-Tails would start laughing. Not exactly, twerp. You're in your mindscape. Here you control everything. But not for long. I will get out of this, and I will kill you, and everyone you love. The Nine-Tails would start laughing. Naruto would say that, I'm pretty sure Hinata can defend herself, and I wouldn't let you do that in the first place. The Nine-Tails would start laughing and say, you think you can stop me? I am the Nine-Tails. Not even the fourth Hokage could stop me. And you let that little snake twerp beat you? The fourth Hokage, your father, would have dominated him. Naruto's eyes just changed into one of surprise. Wait, what did you just say? I said your father would have killed that snake. He's one of the strongest shinobi to ever live. Naruto would collapse to his knees as Kurama realized, oh shit. No one ever told him who his parents are. Kurama would start calming down because he already fucked with this kid enough, and he's like, he's gonna suffer. As he goes to lay down, Naruto would stand up and say, who was my mother? Kurama now lays down would say, well, fuck, I can just as well tell you. Your mother was Kushino Uzumaki, from the royal blood of Uzumaki. She was given to the village to be my next host, after my host before her was about to die. My host before her was Mito Uzumaki, the wife of the first Hokage. Naruto would sit down and tell me your story. Kurama would say, I'm not planning on telling you my story. I told you the least that I had to. Naruto would start bugging him until eventually Kurama would break. Kurama would start. It all started with the old man. We heard stories of the Ten-Tails. The Ten-Tails was a mindless creature of pure destruction, wielded by the one known as Kaguya. I never seen her, don't really know her powers, but old man Hagoromo was a god. He could easily conquer all nine-tailed beasts without even trying if he wanted to. But what he ended up doing is him and his brother beat his mother and split the Ten-Tails into 9 different Biju. That is us. And he starts naming all the Biju, Shukaku, Hanabi, until he eventually gets to himself. And then goes, and me. Naruto would say, okay, then what's your name? Kurama would smirk and say, I almost gave that away. But no, we'll continue this later. The old man quickly grew old and died. He gave his blessing to one of his sons, Ashura. Ashura got the power of the sage, while his older son, Indra, got the eyes. Those devilish eyes. He'd howl out and say, scream, Madara! Naruto would ask what Madara has to do with anything, and the Nine Tails would calm down again. He'd say that centuries had passed and he had been a protector of a rice field. The villagers there loved him and he loved them. That was the most peaceful time he was ever at. But Naruto would ask him to continue. He'd explain that Hashirama and Madara were on a quest to gather the Biju, and thus assembled them all under the leaf, and eventually even giving them to different villages. This is when his tone started to change. He sounded angry. Kurama explained that Biju were like people. We were nice, we protected people. Yet you treated us like weapons. Naruto would just cough and say, they treated you like weapons, now continue. He'd explain that on multiple occasions Madara would basically summon him from the dungeon in the leaf he was kept in, and used him to fight off against Hashirama. And in their last fight, Hashirama broke the seal on him and was able to free him from the summoning. He thought he was finally free from Madara, when Madara used his Mangekyo to force the Nine Tails into one last battle. This was the most epic battle that he's ever seen. He was clouded in Susanoo armor, and he fought. He fought better than he ever did, as he didn't really want to admit this. But that's when he was at his strongest, when he was with that Uchiha. After the fight, Hashirama would seal him inside of his wife, Mito. They'd have one child, and eventually Hashirama would die. Several years later, when Mito was on the verge of death, I was sealed inside of your mother, Kushina. But even after I was torn out of Mito, she lived for about a month. The Uzumaki are just monsters, Kurama would say. Naruto would stop him. What do you mean the Uzumaki are monsters? Kurama would once again go, as much as I learned from Mito and Kushina, the Uzumaki have chakra pulls greater than any other clan, matching those of even higher than the Senjus. Some of them, even though they were Chunin, they could beat entire Kage. The entire village of Uzagakiri, or the land of Whirlpool, was full of these beasts. That's why they got wiped out. This is all information Kurama got from Kushina while she was alive. She didn't tell him, but he just basically knew from being inside of her and watching what was happening through her. Naruto would ask then, why did you kill my parents? Kurama's face would change and say, I didn't want to talk about this, but I didn't kill your parents. I was under the control of an Uchiha. Naruto would say, but aren't all the Uchiha dead? Kid, that didn't happen till 6 years after that. Someone that had the presence of Madara, but he also felt like Hashirama. Don't know how, but he was a monster. He used his one single Mangekyo to put me under his control. Even when I broke out, I still continued rampaging. Naruto would jump up and say, then you killed them. Yes, but before I did, I asked them not to seal me again. I just wanted to be free. But they didn't listen. They didn't understand. And Naruto would calm down. Okay, I get it. You just wanted to be free. People have been treating you like a weapon. Kurama would be saying, yes, and as soon as I get out of here, I'll kill all of them. I'll kill you too, kid. Naruto would say, yo, calm down, Jamal. I'm not like the rest. Don't pull out them nine tails. Kurama would just basically sit back down and say, okay, what do you want? I told you my story. Naruto would then just hum to himself, okay then.
He'd walk up the cage and then get to a label. He'd look and say that this is the seal, right? Kurama would nod as Naruto ripped it off. Kurama thought he was free, but he wasn't. I can't open this for some reason. Kurama says, they must have given the seal's key to someone else. Naruto would say, wait a second, I got an idea. He'd step inside of the cage and this is Kurama's chance. He can kill Naruto right now and gain control. He'd rush his paw to right in front of Naruto, but he'd stop with his nail right between Naruto's eyes. As he says, you tried, kid. He'd lower his palm and Naruto would smile as he jumps up on Kurama's head. As this happens, Kurama would sigh and say, get off my head. Naruto would say, not until you tell me what your name is. The name is Kurama, but we ain't friends. Not for now, at least, Naruto would say as the gates just burst open. Kurama would bolt back up to his feet with Naruto getting launched in the air. I'm free! Finally! As the mindscape starts changing into a field resembling that to one within the land of fire. This is something Naruto's seen before on geographic maps and things. This is the rice paddy field that Kurama lived in. He would go to between two hills, and behind them was a third. He'd cuddle himself perfectly into that, and Kurama would tell to Naruto, or say to him, thanks, kid. This is a lot more comfortable than that damn cage. If you ever need me, just ask. He'd smile and then he'd fade out as he woke up in the real world. Time in the mindscape lasts as long as it needs to last, not necessarily vertical. So, as he woke up, he started remembering everything from his landscape, or from his mindscape, as a tear falls down his face. Hinata would ask him, Naruto, what's wrong? He'd say, I know who my parents are. She'd ask, what do you mean? And we get yet another flashback. He would be inside of his mindscape and two figures would appear right after he talked to Kurama. They would start talking to him, Minato and Kushina. They'd explain how they're proud of him for becoming friends with the Nine-Tails and becoming the man he is, hoping he treats everyone right. Eventually getting to the point where their chakra reserves are low. They say that they will stay here for a day if he ever needs them, and for now, they'll leave. They leave for him to basically use them a day that he would really need them, and he'd wake up to Hinata. He'd explain everything that happened in his mindscape, and Hinata told him that it's okay, but we need to get to the main hall. The Hokage is about to explain the rest of the Chunin exam. Naruto would quickly hop up, but then quickly go dizzy just as fast, and then would be grabbed by Hinata, telling him to slow down there, bucko, you were really injured. He'd tell her not to worry, and they'd head to the main hall, where he saw Sasuke waiting. Him and Sasuke would basically just stare at each other and then nod, as they had a conversation while fighting Orochimaru. Conversation where they agreed that they will become strong enough to defeat this monster right before they basically passed out. So, here they stand. The Hokage would talk about the prelims and too many people passed, and how who's going to go against who. Because the sound group wasn't basically eliminated, I'm going to go with Kabuto's entire group quitting instead of just Kabuto. And the two that were fighting, Kabuto's entire group would quit, and then basically the girl from the sound trio would also quit, so that the fights were even. The guy from basically Kankuro's group would be replaced with Sasuke, or not Kankuro's group, Kabuto's group would be replaced in Sasuke's fight by the dude with the gauntlet, and so on. So as people continue, the fights will go as they did in canon, with Shino blocking up the one sound guy's pipes, Sasuke basically beating the guy with the gauntlet after getting some space between them. Obviously, he'd use the gauntlet to try and injure Sasuke's ears. Sasuke would realize what he's doing, trying to catch his balance since that's an entire part of your eardrums. He'd jump back. He'd say, okay, that won't work.
He then started going through some hand signs for the fire style fireball jutsu, but he'd have an idea, keep it in. He'd amp his feet with chakra, basically lunging towards the other guy, grabbing a kunai and trying to hit him with it. That other guy blocks with the gauntlet, and Sasuke would lift the gauntlet and then let his jutsu release, basically hitting him with a fire style jutsu straight to the chest. This would basically have the proctors call it off so that the Sound Kid doesn't die and Sasuke would get off. Hinata would be faced against Neji, just like in canon, and Naruto would be faced against Kiba. Sakura and Ino would still have their fight and still tie because both of them still useless as shit. With Hinata having a better fight against Neji, throwing a few air palms to the point where both of them are exhausted. But Neji would say that, "I'm not going to lose, Hinata. I will prove that I am the greatest prodigy in the Hyuga clan," as he throws off his first attempt at basically the wind palm. He'd throw it towards her and they'd both get knocked against opposite sides of the stadium since he didn't learn to perfect it. Hinata would be knocked out as Neji stood up a little hazy. Naruto would jump down as Neji walks across to Hinata and picks her up. He'd already been declared the victor. Him and Naruto would walk her to the stands where Neji would be congratulated by his team and his sensei. Lee would look at Neji confused and said, "I thought you didn't like anyone, rival?" And Neji would respond with, "Destiny perceives me to protect Lady Hinata." He's still going to be a little influenced by the destiny thing. I'm not going to take that completely away. But Naruto would smack him against the back of the head saying, "If you don't stop talking all that bullcrap about destiny, I'm going to knock you out." They'd just nod and Naruto would jump off for his fight against Kiba. His fight against Kiba is going to go a lot different. He don't really got no chakra. All his chakra went to healing his body. So he has an idea. As the match is about to start, he once again enters his mindscape willfully and said, "Yo, mind if I test out your power? I promise I won't use it as a crutch." Kurama would smile and say, "Sure kid, just take it." Naruto would all of a sudden sprout 3 tails. Everyone in the stadium got worried. Gaara got an evil smirk on his face. Naruto would just push his hand out and say, "Don't worry, I'm in control." He'd lunge towards Kiba, basically beating him, throwing him from side to side, hitting him from every way possible. And as he's up in the air, Naruto says, "Well, now you're here," creating 3 clones, all who threw wind palms from the bottom at separate times so that it hit him up further and further, with Naruto kicking down on him to push himself up further, throwing both his hands down with separate air palms and says, "Naruto Uzumaki Hyuga Barrage, air palm version." He'd throw air palms down and Kiba would be sent into the ground. He'd basically had just eaten his words of him saying that he's going to become Hokage and then he's going to take Hinata from Naruto too, which was a little far-fetched, but it is what it is. Gaara more bloodlusted than ever, the fight with Lee would go a lot different. Gaara would just try to kill him straight out the bat, with Lee having to within the first few seconds take off his weights. He'd say, "Sorry, Guy-sensei, but I must take these off." Guy-sensei would just throw a thumbs up as Lee threw down the weights. Everyone would think, what is taking off some leg weights gonna do? 2 giant craters in the ground form as dust blows up as high as Lee dropped them. And he disappears out the statue. Barely even the Jonin can keep up with his movement. Kakashi even says that he won't even be able to match that with a body flicker. Lee is just hitting Gaara and then disappearing again. And this is when Lee says, "Time to get serious. First gate, open!" He then starts overpowering Gaara's sand, hitting Gaara through it. Gaara starts getting more bloodlusted, attacking faster and faster and faster, until something happens. Lee says, "I've had enough. Second gate, open! Third gate, open!" Now, he lunges towards Gaara, throwing his leg around. Even if this kills Gaara, he would at least have the victory. He kicks Gaara on the head, having Gaara fall to the ground. As his sand armor starts cracking, Lee says, "Oh no," as he goes out of the 3rd gate, out of the 2nd gate, and out of the 1st, back into his base. "Oh no, Guy-sensei, it didn't work. It didn't last long enough." This is when
Gaara would stand up, say, blood, blood. He'd start laughing as he threw sand towards Lee, who wasn't able to dodge it. He'd basically pull it up and say, sand burial, as he crushed Lee screaming out. Everyone knew Lee could not handle this. All the Jonin, Naruto, Neji, even some other people from other villages jumped in to stop Gaara. He'd calm down and then go back to the stands, looking at Naruto, saying, I'm going to kill you if we ever meet. Naruto would smirk and say, you can try it, One-Tails. The Jonin's faces would turn bleak, with the Hokage not really changing, but in his mind he thinks, oh, so there might be an invasion. Guess I'm going to take the 1 month to prepare. He then shout out that basically the semifinals are over and that they must return in a month to see their opponents at the Chunin Exam Stadium. They'd all leave with Naruto basically saying that, yo, Hinata, let's go to the hot springs. She'd agree and they'd be off. This is obviously a day after the Chunin exams and not the same day. With Naruto, when he gets in there, Hinata is about to enter the other side. When he gets there, he sees an old man with white hair, and he walks on the water, grabbing the old man by the hair and throwing him outside. The old man is able to maneuver and basically grapples to the opposite side wall, and then lunges towards Naruto, trying to punch him. But Naruto blocks and then throws an air palm, basically sending him into the water, and the water is spitting up. The girls on the other side would scream, and Hinata would quickly put on her clothes again, before even entering the hot spring, as Jiraiya's like, yo kid, what was that for? I'm peeping. Naruto would have an angry look on his face, and he says, well, you are pretty strong, but my girlfriend's on that side, and if you continue peeping, I will kill you. Jiraiya's expression would change and say, oh, you'll kill a legendary Sannin? Naruto basically freezing, saying, Jiraiya? Jiraiya would say, yes, but who are you? He'd say, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, as he bowed down. He says, Naruto? And Naruto would say, yes, Minato's son. Now Jiraiya is just flabbergasted. Since when did Naruto know that Minato was his father? Naruto would sit him down to explain everything. He'd basically also yell out to Hinata that she should go back to the Hyuga compound. He'd meet her there. They'd relax in the water as Naruto told him about how he befriended the Nine-Tails while being knocked out. He also encountered Orochimaru and talked to his parents within his mindscape, and they told him about him. It was already night and the hot springs were about to close as they got out with shriveled up bodies, as Naruto had told Jiraiya about his entire life and how happy the Hyuga clan made him. Jiraiya would be happy that Naruto made good without him. Like, he was supposed to be here, like Minato asked, but he wasn't. He couldn't. So he says that, how about he trains him? He'd say that he should first basically learn the summoning jutsu. But Naruto would say, why would I need to learn a summoning jutsu when I can just summon the Nine-Tails? Jiraiya would say, but what if you want something smaller? Something for recon, or a toad that you're able to hide inside while it sneaks into an enemy village? Naruto would rub his chin and say, interesting. Okay, let's go for it. He'd show Naruto the hand signs, and Naruto would start meditating. Jiraiya would ask him what he's doing, and he says, just wait, I'm gathering chakra. Now Jiraiya is really flabbergasted. There aren't a lot of people that can gather chakra simply by meditating, since that's how Sage Mode works, but Naruto just assembling normal chakra? Naruto would explain the process of how the Hyuga use it to improve their Byakugan, but he's using it just to increase his chakra pool in general. By doing this, you could basically cultivate, just become stronger by meditating. But whatever. He then stands back and then performs the hand signs, clips his finger, and slams it on the ground. First try comes out Gamabunta. They'd have the initial challenge that they did in canon, with Naruto having to once again borrow some of Kurama's chakra, only getting one tail this time since Kurama said that the kid's getting greedy, but it was for a good cause. So, one day down and Naruto already basically got Gamabunta. What can Jiraiya really teach him now? Naruto would look up and say, I know, How about you teach me the Rasengan? Jiraiya would pale and say, how do you know about that jutsu? That's an A-rank technique. I can't be teaching that to a genin. He'd say that, well, my father told me about it in my mindscape, and he said that it would be a really useful jutsu. Jiraiya would sigh and say, okay. He'd get out some balls, and for the rest of the month, they'd be working on this jutsu. Obviously, this jutsu being the Rasengan. Throughout this month, Naruto had an idea and tells Jiraiya, hey Jiraiya, you think you can help me with this? Jiraiya would say yes, but only if he reads Make Out Paradise. Naruto would then officially give him the name Pervy Sage, because you can't be giving a 12-year-old boy a porn book. Jiraiya would just rub his head and say, you're right, kid, but never too young for research. Naruto bonks him on the head again and says, flippin' hell, Jiraiya. He said, okay, what do you need help with, kid? Naruto would explain the fundamentals of the Hyuga clan's palm rotation, and then says, okay, if the Rasengan can fly through the air, as he forms a Rasengan only after 2 weeks of mastering it, he will throw it and it eventually dissipates. He says that means that it can stay in the air, right? And Jiraiya would explain that even though it's basically twisting chakra, it basically creates enough of a wind force to lift itself off the ground. Naruto would rub his chin and say, what if we applied something about it to the Hyuga styles of palm rotation? Create a complete dome around us. Getting rid of the 360 vision problem for me since I don't have the Byakugan, but also injuring anything that comes near me, and even, as you said, creating a gust that could even knock away entire ninja tools. Jiraiya would agree and they'd start working on this. They wouldn't necessarily perfect it in time, but the Chunin exams would start. Jiraiya would say that he's going to stay here just to see how Naruto does as an apology for what happened. The third Hokage would invite Jiraiya up to the booth since he was staying there. So it was Jiraiya, the third Hokage, and Orochimaru in disguise as the third Kazekage. They'd all be talking, and eventually the matches would start. Naruto against Neji would go for a taijutsu only battle. This is what Naruto vows, for they are both of the Hyuga clan, and thus they will fight like Hyuga. At this point, everyone considers Naruto part of the Hyuga clan, even though he's not a Hyuga, because of his great relationship with Lady Hinata. So, as they start fighting, it goes a lot similar to any normal Naruto fight, with them trying to burst each other's chakra points, Naruto from knowledge and Neji from his Byakugan. But it would eventually get down to where Neji was tired, Naruto not, and Neji throwing a palm rotation. This would hit Naruto and pretty badly injure him, but now it's time for him to show off his technique. He'd run towards Neji, basically spinning, similar to how Kiba would spin if he initiated the Fang over Fang. This intrigued Kiba and his sister in the stands. They go like, wait, is he? But no. Then they see him pushing out his hands, spinning his entire body in a spherical mode. This is the first time Naruto's trying it. The Rasengan version of the palm rotation, or what he calls the palm dome. He'd throw his basically rotation palm in every direction, eventually hitting Neji. It would knock him against the wall, and Naruto would walk up. He'd say, well, what now, Neji?
Hey, look at you, what's up?
Neji would shake his head and say, you won, Naruto. You're the greatest prodigy of the Hyuga. Naruto would smile and help Neji up as Neji lifted Naruto's hand in Naruto's victory. The entire crowd would actually begin to cheer because that was impressive. 2 genin doing beyond Jonin level techniques of the Hyuga clan. Even the leader, Hiyashi, he was impressed by Neji's efforts, since no one ever taught Neji this technique. Neji's father jumps off from the stands, running towards his son, hugging him and saying that he's proud. This would lead into Naruto and Neji just leaving the stands, and all the fights proceed as canon that remain at least. And eventually, when Gaara and Sasuke's fight comes up, things would go canon. Sasuke and Kakashi would arrive late, and instead of Sasuke using multiple Chidori, he'd only use 2 Chidori up until this point, and the third landing an actual blow on Gaara, having Gaara create an entire dome over him because of the blood dripping down his forehead. An eye outside. Orochimaru would think to himself, it's too early to start the process. Hiruzen and Jiraiya would look over and say, that's the One-Tails. Why is he in the dome? Orochimaru would sit forward and say, I don't know. He's never done this before. Not even when we attacked other villages have you ever done this before. Maybe it has something to do with him getting hurt for the first time. Or second time in this case. Kid never really saw blood. At least not from him. And that's when it happens. Gaara would break out and a Genjutsu would fall. Basically, the Hokage and Jiraiya would jump up to the roof where Orochimaru would come out and they'd start the sound invasion. Naruto, Sasuke, and Hinata almost immediately break out of the Genjutsu, with Sakura and Shikamaru being next. Naruto would realize Shikamaru ain't really asleep, bonk him on the head and say, come on Shikamaru, you need to help. Instead of, as in canon, Hinata being kidnapped, she was actually waiting on the stands for Naruto. So when the Cloud Shinobi came around, they were like, the Cloud's into this too? And the two Cloudmen would say, hand over the Hyuga. For only one of them to be hit by Neji in the back of the head, incapacitating him. The other one trying to grab Hinata, but she hits him with an air palm, basically forcing him backwards. This allows for more of the Hyuga clan, instead of chasing after Hinata, to be able to just help in the invasion. Up on the roof, it's Orochimaru versus Jiraiya and the Hokage. As their fight starts, he says, can you block this, Hokage? As he throws his hands out and hits the ground. Two cases emerge, with the third coming up. Hiruzen would throw a jutsu saying, no you don't, Orochimaru, not him, not the fourth, as the suitcases stopped. Orochimaru would sigh and say, oh well, I only need the first and second to defeat you. And that interaction would stop there, as we look back to Naruto. Naruto, Shikamaru, Hinata, Neji, and Sasuke would be rushing after Gaara, with Sasuke being ahead of everyone else. When they eventually encounter the basically sound Jonin, Shikamaru and Neji would stay behind. So when they do, Naruto and Hinata would continue to where they see Sasuke being pulverized by Orochimaru and his curse seal being awakened. Naruto was the only, everyone at this point knew because he awakened his curse seal 2 times already in front of other people. So he'd be like, Sasuke, control yourself. This anger is not you. That's what Naruto would scream out. For Sasuke to just look over at him and say, I will kill him. But Gaara starts choking him further. You're not gonna kill anyone. As his voice becomes more like Shikaku's, he'd give off a laugh. For only him to be struck by Naruto's air palm. Hinata would be there trying to help Sasuke, with Naruto fighting with Gaara. Gaara would transform more and more until he eventually turns into the One-Tails. At this point, people don't know he's mastered the Nine-Tails, and Kurama don't really want to bother fighting Shikaku. So Naruto would end up summoning Gamabunta. Gamabunta would be like, what do you want, Naruto? He'd say that, oh, we got a little squirrel over here, with Shikaku throwing wind bullets saying, I'm not a squirrel, I'm the One-Tailed Shikaku. Naruto would have the same interaction with Gaara he had, and telling him how Hinata is the reason he's sane. Gaara needs to find people he loves, people he needs to protect, and he will be happy. On the other side though, Hiruzen and Jiraiya had been fighting the first, second, and Orochimaru, and had been getting really worn down, when Jiraiya had an idea. He'd push against the first chest and then scream, 8-pronged seal, pushing him down on the ground, sealing him away within a piece of paper. Hashirama would smile, saying, thank you, as his spirit fades back into the afterlife. Orochimaru, seeing what they're gonna do, has Tobirama only do basically defensive jutsu. Hiruzen would say, no way. He'd throw 2 clones out, basically one handling Tobirama as him and the other clone approach Orochimaru. He'd tell Jiraiya to stay back, and as he starts performing hand seals with all of his clones simultaneously, Jiraiya screams, no sensei, it's not worth it! as he starts moving towards Hiruzen. One clone seals Tobirama as the Reaper breaks through it. The Reaper breaks through another clone and Hiruzen himself, pulling either side of Orochimaru, taking both of his arms away, and even pieces of his brain. He feels a little confused. He doesn't know what's going on. The barrier around them break as the Sound Force grab Orochimaru and jump off. Kabuto would interfere, basically keeping them there as long as he possibly could. When Kakashi jumps up to finish his fight with Kabuto, the Sound Force is long gone and Kabuto just body flickers away. This is a problem. The third is dead, and Orochimaru got away. On the other side, Naruto and Gaara had just finished their fight. Naruto had knocked Gaara out after de-transforming Gamabunta from his transformed state of the Nine Tails, and basically what that ends up meaning is he gives Gaara a Takano Jutsu, saying that if you love people, you will succeed. This would be the end of the Sound Invasion, and Naruto and Sasuke would be put in the hospital for their respective injuries. Naruto being out in a few days and Sasuke still unconscious. Naruto would return to the Hyuga compound where he finds Hinata, and they just start talking. So, last time we left off, basically, the Sound Invasion just ended up, and Naruto would not have really taken too much damage, but would have been exhausted from any chakra after fighting with Gaara, as well as Sasuke ending up in the hospital because of the curse mark. So Naruto would go back and forth between the hospital to check on Sasuke, obviously, because chakra reserves for him ain't that much of a problem. When he runs low, Kurama would help him every now and then. And what basically would end up happening is Jiraiya would pop in and be like, yo kid, come over here. Sasuke would think, who the hell is this guy? But he wouldn't question it. Naruto would follow Jiraiya, and Jiraiya would explain that he needs to come with him so that they can go fetch Tsunade. Flashback into the council room. In the council room, Jiraiya stood in front of the council. They explained that they wanted him to be the Hokage now that Hiruzen had passed away, and he would reject it. They would obviously just wonder who could they then think of, as Danzo would obviously say that he should be the next Hokage, and Jiraiya would put that thought down immediately. He said that, I know, I'll go get Tsunade. Everyone on the council would keep quiet for a sec, as one council member will point out that she's been missing and no one knows her whereabouts. When Jiraiya gives off a smirk. None of you know her whereabouts. That does not count for me, he says, smirking. And then he disappears out of the room. It was a shadow clone. The council would just leave it and basically know that he would bring her back. And Naruto, who was currently speaking with Jiraiya, would basically say that, what do I get out of this? And Jiraiya would obviously say, how about a new jutsu? Naruto would look interested, and Jiraiya would say, how about a defensive type this time? Naruto would say, but I already got the palm rotation. Jiraiya would once again stroke his chin and say, what about if you don't have enough chakra to commit the palm rotation? Naruto would say, what about the Nine Tails cloak? That will also eventually run out. I got a technique that takes nearly no chakra and is almost impenetrable. Could also be turned into an attack at the same time, similar to what you did with that rotation, was it? Naruto would eventually give up and agreed to go with him. They'd be off to find Tsunade. Yet it's still a week before they actually get to Tsunade. So Naruto would ask Jiraiya what he's going to teach him. Jiraiya would go through the hand seals and go, ninja art, spiky needle hair technique. His hair would go all around him, and he'd say from inside the hair, come on kid, attack me. Naruto would throw in a relentless blow as he just forms a Rasengan and straight up attacks Jiraiya with inside his hair. Jiraiya would say, I knew that was a Rasengan, I heard it power up. Cocky, as Naruto would jump back. Naruto would rub his chin this time and say, okay, show me the attack.
Jiraiya would stand up from his hair, making sure it doesn't point at Naruto, and then put his hands into the ram seal to channel chakra as he yells out loudly and his hair starts shooting out like needles. Naruto would be pretty impressed because if this was group combat, he could have easily taken out about 20 Jonin just from that one attack if he, didn't stand up. Jiraiya would smirk and say, "What do you think, kid?" As Naruto starts performing the techniques and his hair starts growing and just shooting out randomly. Jiraiya would say, "Hey, stop channeling chakra quickly!" As Naruto breaks the hand seals and say, "Whoa, that's actually kind of hard." Jiraiya would wipe sweat from his brow and say, "It's impressive that you could even generate that already, but you can't go around just doing random hand signs without knowing how you're supposed to channel chakra, kid," as he knocks him on the head. Naruto would rub his head saying, "Yo, damn, sorry. Just, I was so used to being able to perform a technique after seeing it once that I didn't really think that would happen." Jiraiya would smirk and say, "You know that there was a time I wouldn't train a prodigy, because if you don't work hard for what you got, is it really worth training you?" Naruto would look down and say, "No, because without hard work, no one will ever get anywhere." As they continue in their journey. Throughout the next week, Naruto would learn and master this technique, but it would take a lot more chakra than it takes Jiraiya. When Naruto would ask why, he'd point out because Naruto has shorter hair. The longer your hair, the easier it is to perform this technique. With Naruto just saying that then he'll have to grow out his hair, since that's actually a really useful technique. Jiraiya also says that maybe one day they can create a jutsu together that uses that hair as a weapon. Definitely. As he jumps around excited, with Naruto saying, "I've improved so many techniques already. What's another? Sure, Pervy Sage, we could create a jutsu together." Now, it's back to Tsunade. They must find the snail princess, Tsunade herself. So, they would eventually get to a town with Naruto nagging Jiraiya on what his next jutsu is gonna be, but Jiraiya wouldn't say anything. He'd just keep quiet as they walked, because he didn't really know what to teach the grunt next. Like, he can't teach him any of his other jutsu except basic fire style. Does the kid even have fire style? I can't even teach him toad oil until he... As he just sighed, not really knowing what to give Naruto. They would enter the town. Naruto would ask them if Tsunade is there, while Jiraiya would say that, "Follow me." They'd enter a bar as Naruto would say, "Why would she be in here, Pervy Sage?" But as they entered, there is a ruckus on one side of the restaurant. A woman is yelling, "Bring me more sake!" As Jiraiya looks up and says, "There she is, Tsunade." The drunken Tsunade would look up and say, "Jiraiya, what are you doing here?" As she sat back down after getting some more sake. He'd point his student to sit in the inside seat while he sits in the outside, and he'd greet his previous teammate, Tsunade. "How's it been, Tsunade?" "Cut the crap. Tell me what you want, Jiraiya." "Well, interesting you asked that." But before he could say anything, Tsunade says, "Better not be, because that old fool Hiruzen died. We told him to stop being a long time ago." Obviously stumbling her words because she's drunken. Shizune would tell her to calm down a little bit, but she'd freak out saying, "I am calm." As Jiraiya will point out, someone has to be Hokage. We can't let Danzo be Hokage. With Tsunade straightening up, sobering up even some. She'd say, "Why don't you take it, Jiraiya? Because I'm not becoming a Hokage." She'd once again take a chug directly out of the bottle this time, sake. Jiraiya would say, "That's not how it's gonna go." Tsunade would once again burst out and say, "I'm not dying in the position of Hokage like that fool Minato and Hiruzen." Naruto, hearing this, he'd flip the table and say, "Take back what you said about the Hokage. They're the most strongest warriors within the leaf." Tsunade would laugh and say, strongest? More like biggest fools in the world. Thinking they have power. And why are all of them dead? This would obviously invoke something similar in Naruto than Ken, yet instead of where it's dissing Hiruzen, it was more dissing his father because Naruto wasn't as close to Hiruzen in this one. So Naruto would say, okay, fight me then. Tsunade would smirk and say, fight again? Why would I do that? Naruto would say, okay, then let's make a bet. I hear you're the legendary sucker. If you win the fight, then I'll pay off all your debt. But if I win the fight, you'll come back and keep the Hokage seat warm for me. This is when Naruto would first recognize that he really wants to become Hokage and make the Hyuga clan proud. Tsunade would say, you know what, I'll only use this finger, as she points her finger out, getting a little cocky. She grabs some water from Shizune, chugging it to somewhat sober up as they walk out. Naruto would say that, I'm gonna wipe that smirk off your face. As she says, okay, then a little side bet. If you and I even throw in this necklace, I'll do it even if you only land a single hit on me. Naruto would basically tip his hat and say, okay. And as they're walking together, Tsunade hears something. Naruto is halfway down on the ground as she jumps back at him to grab him. But the Naruto she grabs poofs away as she goes, wait, that was a clone? When did you get time to make a clone? He had made a clone while walking away that threw him into the air and then performed the headhunter jutsu to, try and throw her off. But as she's frantically looking around, she says, he must be under me, as she bursts the ground open by punching it. Naruto would say, not exactly, as he spins his entire body at inhumane speeds, creating a giant orb around him. As Tsunade has a flashback to Minato showing Jiraiya the Rasengan. Is this? No, because his entire body's she'd barely be able to dodge as Naruto burrows into the broken ground she just destroyed, further than even the headhunter jutsu would allow him to. She'd say, brat, he jumped. But when she looks in the hole, nothing's there. Another clone? As he runs up from behind her. How does he keep fooling me? She sees something. He has a Rasengan in his hand, but it dissipates before it hits her. He didn't conserve his chakra properly, creating all of those clones. But she thinks that she got him, but as she starts saying that and her punch is flowing, she sees hand signs. He turns as his hair starts spiking out, poking into her fist. She'd pull away screaming as he'd finalize the hand signs, and then ram seal, shooting his hair out like a needle. She'd jump out of the way, but that's about it. Naruto's once again behind her. It was another clone, as he hit her down to the ground with an air palm, saying, air palm! Hyuga strike! As he hit her twice with an air palm, landing ahead of her and saying, well, guess you just lost, granny. She'd say, okay. You won, brat! As she saw everyone flashing through Naruto, as he said, guess you're gonna be Hokage. She sees her former lover, her younger brother, and even Minato and Jiraiya in Naruto. She knows that he'll do it. She'll stand up, basically knocking on him on the head, saying, don't get too cocky, brat, as she lowered her necklace around his neck, tying it. Guess we're going home, Shizune. Jiraiya would smile and say, then let's be on our way. And I would say, one last night of building debt, and then we can leave. That's basically what she thought, or what they thought. What's actually occurring is basically her trying to stall as we have a flashback. The previous day, a slimy, slippery snake and a white-haired bastard showed up, asking her if she could please heal him. Yeah. Remember, Orochimaru still lost his arms in this one, so they kind of still need Tsunade to, heal it, and that would be somewhat of the explanation, while they said that they would bring her lover and her brother back to life. She decided that the next day, or during this night, she'd make Jiraiya a little tipsy and, then take on Orochimaru on her own. And the rest of the night would probably proceed to canon. They would go to bed, and the next morning, Jiraiya isn't getting up. Naruto would be out pretty early, just doing his training, as Shizune would run up and say, "Where's Master Jiraiya? Lady Tsunade, she's challenging Orochimaru on her own." Naruto heard this and immediately ran towards where he felt a strong ki. He creates one clone and says, "Go get Jiraiya." And he just keeps running. He sees Tsunade as she throws a punch at Orochimaru, who dodges pretty easily. He says, "Now's my chance." He pulls out some kunai out of his pouch, throw them, putting his hands into the Shadow Clone Jutsu's cross hand sign, and screams out, "Shuriken Clone Jutsu!" as it almost hits Orochimaru, with one scratching his arm, leaving a little mark, if you know what I mean. So, this is going to be a fight. Naruto would see someone with white hair and a mask on his face. This is obviously Kabuto, but he doesn't exactly know that Kabuto's a traitor yet. And he doesn't actually know who Kabuto is on top of that. But whatever. He looks to Tsunade asking, "Yo, Granny, you okay? Jiraiya's on the way." She'd hold her face as she sees blood on her hands. She's in shock. Naruto would see this and how her eyes are fluctuating. Blood? She must be scared of blood. As he creates a few clones to attack them, as he runs back to grab her and jump away. Kabuto would easily disperse of the clones and then say, "Lord Orochimaru, what would I do?" Onto the battlefield stumbles a drunken Jiraiya, saying, "I will kill you, Orochimaru." Obviously, because of something Tsunade did last night. Spiking his drink and all. Adult words that YouTube does not allow alcohol. But yeah. So, a fight would ensue. A drunken Jiraiya would be fighting off against Orochimaru, and the fight would be pretty even. A dude that cannot use his arm against a dude that can barely stand. This is a fight of the generation. While Kabuto was trying to, kill Tsunade for betraying Orochimaru, and Naruto was just keeping him at bay, pretty easily, might I add. While he says, "Okay, can't waste any time. Pervy Sage ain't gonna keep this up for long." As he waves the hand signs, creating 10 clones surrounding Kabuto. He'd say, "Uzumaki, air palm barrage," as he hits him higher into the air with air palms. And as Kabuto thinks he has an opening to get free, the real Naruto, comes from above, screaming, "Final strike," as he throws 2 air palms at Kabuto, sending him into the ground. That should have finished him. But his chakra flared, and Naruto could see his wounds healing as he's coming down. "I don't think so." Naruto would form a Rasengan, slamming it down into Kabuto's chest. Thinking he's done, Naruto would walk away to see if Jiraiya's okay. But he doesn't know why. It seems like something's wrong. He looks back to see Kabuto almost stabbing Tsunade, but he jumps in time, getting a hole through his hand, saying, "I don't think so," as he kicks Kabuto under the chin. Tsunade, seeing Naruto once again stand up for her, would stand up and say, "Okay, if he can conquer his fears, so can I," as she goes through the hand signs, biting her finger and slamming it on the ground, summoning the Great Slug. Same goes for Jiraiya, who summons the Toad Boss, Gamabunta. And Orochimaru, who went through or not Orochimaru that went through the hand signs, but Kabuto, using Orochimaru's blood, would summon the Snake Boss. I can't really remember his name, sorry. But Naruto would think, "Okay, Shizune, are you okay?" She'd blush a little, but say, "Yeah, she's okay. He should go help them." Somehow Orochimaru's snake is
keeping both Jiraiya and Tsunade at bay. Like, how powerful is he? Even without his arms, his summoning can do everything. Like, does this dude really need his arms back at all? Seeing as he can hold off two pretty injured, but still uberly powerful Sannin? Naruto knows. He goes into his mindscape for a few seconds saying, "Guess you're gonna be out in the world for one more time, buddy. I'll try and keep you out as long as possible." Kurama would stand up on in the field he laid in, which Naruto created for him in the mindscape, and say, "Sure, let's go, kid," as Naruto goes through the hand signs, not creating any blood, but instead infusing red chakra on his hand as he slams down. Naruto would transform into the Nine Tails. He wouldn't summon him per se, but he'd become him. Orochimaru would be stressed. What? The kid can turn into the Nine Tails? He's a perfect Jinchuriki? As even Tsunade and Shizune look shook. Jiraiya saying, "You get him, Naruto!" As the Nine Tails, who is currently in control, ruthlessly attacks the large snake in Orochimaru. Kabuto would see this as his only chance. He'd grab Orochimaru jumping off. As soon as they hit the ground, he starts going through hand signs as they start sinking. The Nine Tails would grab out, scratching Kabuto on the face, even breaking his mask. But he couldn't kill him. At that moment, the snake would disperse. Even though it was wrapped around Kurama, it couldn't really do much. Kurama would sigh. "Guess I'm going back in the seal. See you later, kid, I'm going to sleep." As he starts de-transforming, and Naruto eventually stands there on his knees. "That's actually pretty exhausting," he'd say. "I'm not used to transforming. Like, my body isn't used to being what it's not." Water break. If you're still here, make sure to go take a sip of water, because it's good to keep hydrated. Now, back to the usually scheduled episode. Naruto would come down to see basically Tsunade rushing him, basically starting a healing palm technique to make sure that he didn't get hurt, asking, "Yo kid, you okay?" Naruto would smile and say, "Just a little exhausted, Granny." She'd smack him over the head and say, "Stop calling me Granny. Aren't you supposed to be healing me instead of injuring me?" Naruto would yell back, and it would be a little cute back and forth as the day goes by. They go to sleep one more time, taking shifts to stay awake to make sure that Orochimaru doesn't come back, and the next day head back to the Leaf. When they do get back to the Leaf, what would end up happening is she would first of all be appointed to help Lee, who had been in really unstable condition. Because in this one, Garo was a lot more brutal when it came to fighting Lee. So, Lee is kind of, almost dead, and Tsunade is actually able to bring him back, but his back is still, destroyed. So that would be an entire 24-hour surgery she'd have to commit right there, and even then, she barely knows if he'll survive. She sighs as she goes to the next patient. But when she enters the room, that patient isn't there. Quick flashback. After getting back, Naruto decided to come back to the village, and Sasuke would have grown pissed. Naruto took out an entire tailed beast, and there's going whispers around the village that he's the strongest, even stronger than most of the Jonin who failed, stuff like that. And it really got to him, especially because of the curse mark, increasing his negative energy. He'd say that they're going to fight, as he basically kicked Naruto in the chest and said, "Come on!" Naruto would tell him to wear his headband, but he'd say that it doesn't matter, he wouldn't get a scratch on his head. He activates his two-tomo Sharingan before Naruto had even gotten to a fighting stance, powering up a Chidori and running towards Naruto. Naruto would easily dodge this and throw an air palm, sending Sasuke into the ground. He'd say, "Don't be foolish, Sasuke." Sasuke would say, "I don't care," firing up a second Chidori, charging at Naruto once again. Naruto would sigh, firing up Rasengan. As he runs towards Sasuke, he'd see Kakashi push out his hand, scream, "Air palm!" pushing Kakashi away, but As Sasuke gets closer, Naruto will grab his arm, shoving the Rasengan straight in front of his face, saying, "I could have killed you right there, Sasuke." As he throws Sasuke back, saying, "Stay down," as he leaves. This is obviously Naruto being a little bit more cocky, and Sakura wasn't really there to give her iconic bitchy scream like she usually does. Kakashi would be impressed that Naruto was not only able to control himself enough not to kill Sasuke, but also able to knock him over in the first place. Sasuke would be devastated as he jumps away, even though Kakashi was trying to talk to him. Jiraiya would land there and he'd say to Kakashi, "Teaching a Genin such a dangerous technique. You've grown ignorant, Kakashi." As Kakashi would look back and say, "You're not much better, Master Jiraiya." Jiraiya would smirk and say, "No, there's a difference. My student isn't stupid. He wouldn't throw a Rasengan at another Genin and actually hurt them. Your student was actually trying to hit Naruto." Kakashi would say he knows, but he gotta go handle something. While this is happening, Sasuke was confronted by the Sound 4, or not by the Sound 4, but he would have been confronted by Kakashi, talking and basically having the interaction they had in canon, with Sasuke saying, "What if I killed your entire family?" With Kakashi saying, "You can't kill who's already gone. My best friends died at war. My lover died to my hand. My sensei died because I couldn't protect him. And my father died due to his own mistakes." As he'd leap away, saying, "You can untie yourself." Now Sasuke's sitting there, more heated than ever. Now he would be approached by the Sound 4, who'd make their proposal. They'd say that Orochimaru could offer him true power. He could make him the ultimate soldier. He could level this village in a second if he wanted to. But Sasuke only wanted to fight Itachi. Whatever. Power is power, he thinks. But then he just thinks back to what happened. If Naruto could get that strong without someone, why does he need someone? He'd say that he doesn't need their help, with them eventually freeing him and telling him if he reconsiders, he should reconsider it, and if he makes up his mind, wants to come with them, for the next week they'll be camping outside the North Gate. He'd leap off to the Uchiha compound, where he'd immediately start packing his things. He's tired of this. He's tired of being second best. If he goes to Orochimaru, he could be the best. At least that's what he thought. Obviously, this is not true. So, now that Sasuke has packed, it's time. He jumps out of the Uchiha basically compound from roof to roof, headed towards the North Gate. As a certain fangirl who never stopped being a fangirl, with bright pink hair and a bitchy attitude, sees him and follows him. She wanted to go check up on him to make sure he's okay, but she saw him jumping out. Where could he be going? She doubts his team would have a mission this time of the night. Usually mission offices close at around 8, but it's already 10. She decides to follow him, and as she sees him heading towards the gate but no team there, she'd say, "Sasuke, wait, where are you going?" He'd say that, "Go back, Sakura." But she screams out, "Sasuke, I love you." He'd appear behind her and say, "You're just an annoyance," as he knocks her out, laying her on a bench, jumping away. The next morning, the gate guards would basically wake her up and take her to the Hokage mansion, where they'd explain that they found her unconscious while they were searching shifts. She'd explain that Sasuke went somewhere. He went out the North Gate. Naruto would basically be called in and asked about this. Not only Naruto, but Hinata and Kakashi as well, while he'd just kick a chair, with Iruka saying, "Naruto, don't kick around the chair." With Tsunade just saying, "Keep quiet, I'm listening." Naruto would curse out and say, "It's probably fucking Orochimaru again." This is some vile language coming from Naruto, and this will be pointed out by Tsunade, and he'd say, sorry, but I forgot that he's power hungry. What can I really tell you? Tsunade would say, okay, where do you think he's going? Naruto would just say, I can only think that he's going to do what Orochimaru tells him to gain power. He's just after one thing. He just wants to kill someone. Obviously, everyone except Naruto knows this, and this is because, you know, it's not that private of knowledge that Itachi killed the entire Uchiha clan, but whatever. Tsunade would say that, well, Kakashi, I'm gonna need you and Hinata to handle this, as she throws them a C-rank scroll. This document needs to be in the sand within the next few days. Kakashi would nod and him and Hinata would move. Naruto would say, what about Sasuke? He'd scream out, as Shikamaru says, may I enter? Tsunade would nod and he'd come in. Naruto would look over and say, what's he doing here? Can you just tell me what we're gonna do about Sasuke? In a frantic way, because why did Sasuke leave? That's all he could think about. Tsunade would tell him to keep quiet for a second. He wants the two of them, as she throws over 2 new headbands, to assemble a squad of any genin there. And as both of them are now tuning, they'd be leading the squad to try and retrieve Sasuke before it's too late. They nod and tie on their new headbands as they just nod to each other and leap in opposite directions. They would be gathering other people. Naruto would arrive at the Hyuga compound where he'd see Neji and say, Neji, I need your help, as he'd explain everything. On the other side, Shikamaru had landed with Choji and explained the same thing. Both sides would be off, with Naruto and Neji running into Kiba. They decide that, okay, now they need to meet Shikamaru at the North Gate. Kiba would just say, okay, and they'd run past Lee, which they check up on quickly before they left, with Neji being glad his teammate is safe. As they did leave the leaf, they'd automatically just start making a formation. Naruto, who can make clones, could check either side, so he's going to be in the middle, with Choji behind Naruto, Kiba in front of Naruto, and then Neji at the back and Shikamaru at the front. This should be the most efficient way for them to move. They lead through the trees, eventually basically seeing some spider webs, which Naruto would try to step over, being, he'd try to step over but slip. Shikamaru would barely be able to freeze him in the shadow position as Choji would grab Naruto to grab him out, and Naruto would just put his foot right in front of the wire. In doing so, he tripped another. So now the team is alerted that Naruto and his squad are there. The team consists of 4 sound shinobi. 1 with 4 arms, 1 with 2 legs, a big fellow with orange hair, and a girl with bright red hair and a flute. The big one, would be carrying basically a basket. But what is inside this basket, you may ask? We have yet another flashback, seeing as the 4 are explaining to Sasuke as they leave the leaf that he needs to eat this certain pill and die to gain power. He'd obviously be confused, but they transform, showing him that the curse mark gets stronger if you are put into a state of near death, so that your body can adapt to what the curse mark is doing. Because if you do it without being in this state, you'd probably die from the pain. He'd pretend to understand and just do as they said, as they sealed him inside of this giant wooden bucket, it seems. Whatever. Now we see Naruto's crew surrounding the team, even though the sound team are all back to back. Shit, they must have triggered another trap. Whatever. Shikamaru would sigh as he throws out his shadow, grabbing one of them by the legs. This is the big guy. He is still barely able to move, saying, "Hey, something got me," as the rest of them leapt away in time, saying that there they are, as the one with 4 arms would throw out multiple kunai, which were made out of some weird fiber-like substance instead of the normal iron for kunai. This would almost hit every one of them in the trees, forcing them to jump out. The big guy would throw the bucket with Sasuke into the next guy, saying, "I'll handle these kids." They tell him, "You better hurry up. We'll find you up ahead. Maybe meet you at the base." As they start leaping away, the one with the 4 arms will pick up Sasuke and continue leaping. Now, what would happen is the big guy would create a dome. And this dome would surround all 5 of the Genin, or 3 of the Genin and 2 of the Chunin, which is the group, which I will be referring to them as. Inside of this, basically, cage, Naruto hears something in his head. "Kid, you're losing chakra and you're losing it quickly." Naruto would say, "Hey guys," and as he says this, Shikamaru would realize the same thing. So would Neji. They'd all say, "We're losing chakra," at the same time. They look at each other, immediately start attacking. They start attacking a certain spot in the wall, which just doesn't work. Another spot and another spot. When Neji decides, "Whatever, I'm gonna activate my Byakugan." He activates his Byakugan and sees one spot in the wall with less chakra than the rest. And he'd look at Shikamaru, pointing, "That's the weakest part within this barrier. We need to break out as quickly as possible." Kiba would throw a fang over fang and do more damage than he did anywhere else on the wall, and it would take a lot longer to regenerate than any other mark they left so far. Neji would look at Naruto and nod as he throws an air palm at the hole to keep it open. Naruto would smirk, creating 2 clones, which would also help them, basically getting 4 air palms at a time, keeping the hole open so that it doesn't regenerate, as Kiba would just continuously throw fang over fangs. His chakra reserves are getting low, but whatever. He pops a soldier pill and just continues. They eventually break through, where Choji would say that he'd handle this buffoon, as he does a partial expansion jutsu hitting him to the side. They'd nod, jumping away, but as they are, Shikamaru would say, "You better come back alive, Choji." And that's how it starts. They would soon after once again catch up to the 3 sound shinobi in this case. This time they're encountered with a bunch of webs. They'd wonder why only one of them is there. It's the one with the 4 arms. They'd say, "So why'd you stay back?" "Well, let me explain. I'm the strongest of the 4. I'm also the leader. That back there was our weakest member, and I pretty much expected you to kill him. So what I did is I gave Sasuke, to my teammates and had them continue, while I stay back and kill you." As he says this, his webs would sling over, grabbing everyone. Now they need to struggle to escape. Eventually, finding a method to fight back, Neji would agree to stay back and fight this guy. He has 360 vision. He has the best chance of not being surprise attacked. The team would agree, once again leaping off, with Shikamaru saying, "You better come back alive, Neji." They'd leap on. The 3rd time's the charm, right? Well, incorrect. This time, once they run into the 2, they'd be encountered by something wrong. Naruto would see his hand, and his other hand, and another hand, as he gets punched in the face. He'd get thrown back against Kiba, who feels the same thing. He's like, "Wait, what?" And it turns out that the dude with the 2 heads only had 1 head, which made it even more confusing, as he gave the gourd to the girl and said, "Tayuya, quickly, get him to the base. Kabuto should be there to intercept you and grab him." As she jumped away. Basically, what happened is this man right here has an ability to split himself into multiple parts, as him and his twin both had this ability. His twin would separate from Kiba, then reattach to him, as they say, "Oh, this is going to be interesting." They'd start fighting with the group. until Kiba would eventually say that he's going to be the one to interact with this one. They need to go. This is going to be easy. It's a 2v2. Not even that hard. Like an elite Genin like himself can take on this chump. And so Shikamaru and Naruto would jump on, with Shikamaru once again saying, "You better come back, Kiba." As if it was foresight that he thought they were gonna die. No wonder. These guys were actually able to keep them all busy at the same time. They can just buy time till they get Sasuke back, because they know he's in that gourd, as Neji pointed out earlier. They continue until they finally block the girl in. They think that they'd have her, but she'd say not quite, as she starts playing a sound on her flute. For a few minutes, they'd be stuck in a genjutsu as she got away. When they eventually broke out of this seemingly really advanced genjutsu, they're able to follow once again. She had stalled a good few minutes. But inevitably, they caught up once again. They think that it's time, but a fifth person would jump out. One last person they haven't seen. A really pale boy with white hair and 2 red dots on his head. Tayuya would be a little scared, or at least that's what we know the girl's name is. Sakan and Ukan earlier told her that she needed to go. So she did. But now she just seems scared. She'd say, "Kimimaru, what are you doing here?" The pale boy we now know as Kimimaru would say, "Tayuya, I'm here to get Lord Orochimaru's vessel," as he'd just take the gourd and jump away. Naruto would jump after him really quickly, as Tayuya would seemingly just grow the curse mark all over her body. Then her skin would go dark, growing a horn. As she plays her flute, a demon would grab Naruto by the foot, throwing him back. But now demons are stuck. Along with her, she can't move her fingers. Shikamaru had grabbed her with a shadow possession as she did her jutsu. He'd say, "Naruto, quickly, I can't hold her for long," as he starts trembling, as she starts moving once again to start playing the flute. Naruto would make it off as Shikamaru would start his battle with Tayuya. Now, Naruto is chasing after the boy, who is seemingly a lot faster than him. He'd have an idea. He'd create a bunch of shadow clones and have them help throw him forward, as he'd disband them to keep his chakra reserved. Because even though he has a lot of chakra, he doesn't have infinite amounts of the things. And when he does eventually catch up to the boy, they start fighting. This is a fight. He feels his adrenaline pumping. He's never fought with someone this strong. He feels him. This guy is a match for him. His adrenaline is pumping more and more until he eventually hits a blow, connecting his hand to the guy's shoulder. And he forms a Rasengan, thinking this is it. He basically tries and slapping him with the Rasengan, but something happens. The guy whose hand was formerly on his back, with Naruto thinking it was probably some muscle reaction to try and grab a sword. But no, he pulls out his entire spine, stopping Naruto's hand, kind of whiplashing it towards him as he jumps away. As this happens, Naruto sees he can manipulate his bones. He'd start shooting the points of his finger out, continuously regenerating it as his entire spine just grew back. He stands once more, prepared to fight Naruto. Sasuke, on the other hand, had finally woken up inside of the gourd, breaking it open and leaping away. Naruto would try and go past, but once again, this man that can somehow control his bones stopped him. They'd have a mild conversation, with Naruto trying to buy time to see if one of his teammates could come up and help him just one more time. He needs to convince Sasuke to come back, even if he has to break every bone in his body. Sasuke will come back. Naruto would once again engage with taijutsu with this man. Every time he tries to hit him with his spine, or his spinal sword as I like to call it, Naruto would use an air palm to throw it away, making sure that he is 100% safe. As another clash would happen, Naruto feels his reserve tingling. He also feels a sharp pain in his chest. What could this be? Now he might get hit. He sees the spine coming closer and closer as he's suddenly flung away from it, as the spine also goes other ways, sending the boy known as Kimimaru away. Naruto just hears, "Leaf Hurricane!" Turns out the reason that Lee was outside and well was because Tsunade had went onwards with the operation, which was a 50-50 chance, giving Lee the ability back to become a shinobi. Even though he shouldn't be walking like he is, he needed to make sure that his allies were safe. And as he passed through, he saw all the other genin handling their opponents, as he needed to help Naruto, or at least the next genin that needed it. No, he must fight. He must help. He'd show Naruto to go. Naruto would jump off after Sasuke, while Lee is here, left fighting this opponent. Naruto would eventually be found in a cave, a dark cave where he can hear laughter from every corner. He'd see a gray figure with two hands sticking out of his back, something like wings. But as he sees Sasuke's glowing two-tomo Sharingan coming from this beast. That's Sasuke. He'd chase him and they'd start engaging in taijutsu, throwing hands if you will, and would eventually break outside. Once they break outside, Naruto could see someplace he recognizes, the waterfall at the end, or the waterfall of the end, if you will. They'd both land on opposite statues as they fought, with Sasuke saying, "Now I have power. Now I will kill you," Naruto giving an insane laugh off. Now we go back to the start. Choji had been fighting the bigger one of the Sound Four, and their fight had started pretty even, with the bigger guy, activating his curse mark and getting an upper advantage. But that's not gonna last long. Choji had something up his sleeves. Pills. These pills were special chakra reserving pills that his clan used only in deadly situations. There were 3 stages: green, yellow, orange, and then the forbidden one, the 4th, the red. He had already taken the green at the start of the fight to make his reserves just that much bigger. But now he knows he must go on to the yellow. He pops the yellow and finally closes the gap between him and the first stage curse mark. He'd be throwing hands with this man's that's easily Jonin level. But this wouldn't last long. He'd feel himself falling behind as the man once again transformed. This time his skin taking a darker tone, his hair going longer, and all these bumps forming all across his body. A menacing laugh would come from him, a laugh of insanity, as he feels 10 times stronger. Choji would finally have the courage to pop the orange pill. He must kill this so that his teammates won't be in danger up ahead. The battle would be long and hard, and Choji would eventually be forced to pop the red pill. He had been concerned about the red pill since the red pill, if you eat the red pill, sure, you'd become 1,000 times stronger temporarily, but you died afterwards, since it temporarily opens the 8th gate. No, he can't die. He sprouts wings as he ate the red pill, and attacks this monster. It's a 1v1. They're even, to every point. They beat each other down to a bloody pulp, as it looks like both of them are about to die. The big guy, we now know as Jogo, would look down laughing. "Looks like I win," as he pulls back his fist. And the camera zooms out to our second opponent, Neji versus the 4-armed guy. The 4-armed guy would produce this weird liquid from his mouth, forming arrows, which he then put into a bow, which he'd continuously shoot. He seems to be a lot like a spider. He created an entire web after all. Hydration break. Back to the story. Even though he is like a spider, he would not crawl around like one. He'd jump like a shinobi from tree to tree, summoning spiders to try and make Neji uncomfortable, to expand his web. But Neji would be precise and fast enough to destroy every one of them. He'd throw a couple of air palms to destroy the webs where he could, to give him as much breathing room as possible, but he would eventually get overwhelmed. Not too long after that, he'd find a way to break through the webs. They're just like human muscle. Enough chakra will tear them. So he'd start expanding more and more chakra to destroy the webs. As the four-armed man would progress into his second stage of the curse mark, having his first stage active until this point. As he goes into his second state, the similarities between him and a spider just become more obvious, and his and Neji's battle gets more intense. Eventually, he'd go through the hand signs for his summoning jutsu and scream out, "Summoning jutsu, 8-legged spider queen," as he summons a giant spider that can see all over the battlefield. It didn't attack, it just stood there. Neji wondered why as he continued to defend. Eventually, something would happen. An arrow would go right into his blind spot even though he was using the rotation. Hit him right in the back, the one place he couldn't see. As he looks up to the spider, they share a vision. That's what's happening. And yes, he's found Neji's blind spot. Neji would be able to somewhat counter this blind spot by using the rotation and a combination of the air palms with continuous movement, but this man just got faster ever since he transformed into that dark-skinned horn state where he grows horns on his head and his skin becomes like leather. And all these spiders don't really help. Neji would get arrow after arrow implanted in his back. Bloodied and beaten, he'd look up and say, "I will He pukes up blood. Yeah. As the camera once again zooms out and we see Kiba. Kiba had encountered the two brothers who were one. They had just gone into their second stage curse mark and were engaging, or in their first stage curse mark, with the marks covering their entire body. They would engage with taijutsu, obviously, fighting off against Kiba. Every now and then jumping away as Kiba would throw a fang over fang in combination with Akamaru. He'd have enough, he'd have to finish this. He'd say, "Akamaru," as he threw a pill. Akamaru would bite down onto it as he bites onto another. He'd jump down onto all fours and then scream out, "Man-Beast transformation! Man-Beast clone!" As Akamaru would join a similar state, or at least look like Kiba. Now their fang over fangs would be more efficient. They'd throw them more often, and eventually the brothers would, for some reason, just stand still and let it hit them. But now Kiba feels something. He feels fists, and eventually he sees a hand stabbing into his stomach. He got hurt this quickly? Whatever. He literally grabbed the brother by the head, pulling him off of his body, throwing him to the side, saying, "I won't lose to you," as he once again throws a fang over fang. He'd feel his stomach start to bleed. He did hit a vital spot, as he crawls into a nearby river along Akamaru. They'd stay underwater most of the way, trying to stay away from the brothers, and eventually get out. But the brothers were soon to follow. They would eventually find them outside of the river in some bushes, with Kiba saying, "It's been a great time serving with you, Akamaru, but we need to defeat them. Now, dynamic duo," or dynamic marking in this case, as Akamaru would jump out pissing on the two brothers. They'd wonder, what the hell is this? As they see Kiba screaming, "Akamaru, now!" Akamaru would jump back onto Kiba's back as he says, "Man-Beast transformation! Try Man-Beast!" As he transforms into a giant 3-headed chimera-looking dog. As he looked down at the two brothers, saying, "No," as he gives out one big growl. Fang over fang, gigantic pit bull, as he hits both brothers who had just transformed into their second state. Half their bodies each would be this black substance, up from the horn all the way down the middle. Looks like there's supposed to be one in this state. Whatever. They're both getting hit around, as Kiba even leaves it and continuously barrages them. They continue attacking Kiba, and Kiba's beast form is still taking a lot of damage. He's scratched up, taken many hits, and even had his stomach sliced open, his chest, his neck, everything. This might be it for him and Akamaru. They fall out of the transformation, with both brothers still standing high. The camera pans out from a bleeding, near-death Kiba. We now see Shikamaru facing off against the redhead from earlier. He is standing strong. He has not yet taken any hits, but he hasn't been dealing any either. He's been using most of his chakra to jump from tree to tree, to at least figure out what her abilities are. He knows that it's some sort of genjutsu, and that for some reason this horn state made her chakra reserve spike a lot. And also now he sees trees getting knocked over. He knows something's wrong. He'd start channeling his eyes with chakra to be able to see, but what he sees wasn't something he'd expect. He sees 3 giant genjutsu beasts that can affect the real world. This must be because of this form, he thinks. And he'd start his fight. His fight would be a combination of him trapping her and throwing kunai at her, barely being able to dodge it, while she slowly took damage. But he eventually knows his reserves are too low, finally getting hit by the beast continuously. They're doing a lot of damage, and he sees that one of them is able to steal souls, as he felt his chakra leaving his body when it touched him. He has to stay away from that one. But he can't, his stamina is low, barely has any chakra. He continues getting hit, getting put in a really bad state. As he says, "My final trump card." He'd pull out his hands and his shadow would extend backwards. She'd say, "Where's your shadow going? I'm right over here." But it already grabbed her. He'd stand up saying, "Shadow strangle jutsu," as she can't move. She feels hands choking her, all over her body, grabbing, pushing her muscles down. She'd say, it hurts. It's inevitable. I'm gonna kill you, and you're going to suffer." She'd scream out, as Shikamaru would say, "I know I'm going to suffer. I just need to buy time for Naruto. Naruto needs to bring Sasuke back." Naruto would leap ahead. Or not Naruto, Shikamaru would leap ahead, as he knows he needs to finish her off. But he gets smacked against a tree. Now he's done for. Multiple bones broken, no chakra, no stamina either. He's dead. He sees a hand coming closer. The hand of a giant, as the camera pans out, back to our favorite bushy-browed, green suit-wearing idiot, Lee, fighting against the teen that can remove his bones from his body, Kimimaro. Kimimaro would be fighting really efficiently with Lee, but he'd seem to get slower, and Lee had realized this. He needs to end it. He's getting tired. His back won't last for long. He can't use the gates in this state, but what he can use is, he has a flashback of Tsunade wanting to give him medicine, but Guy stopping her. "Make sure that's non-alcoholic, Tsunade." As Tsunade would turn around and say, "What do you mean, Guy?" Making it seem as they've met before. "Well, let me tell you a story. About a year back, me, Neji, Lee, and Tenten went out to celebrate. And there, Lee had taken a sip of my sake instead of taking a sip of his child juice. And you see, it took both me, an elite Jonin, and Neji to keep him down." Tsunade would be shocked. It takes more than just Guy to keep this Genin down? What could sake do to him? And Guy would say, "Exactly. Lee here is a master of the drunken fist. If he tastes even a little bit of alcohol, he becomes a drunken master. His mind goes numb and all silly, but his attacks become more fierce. His body's limiters are removed, and he can move like a monster. He destroyed that entire restaurant, and our team still hasn't paid off all the debt, as he cries. Lee, who had still only gotten out of the surgery recently, would have looked down to his hand and said, "Will I ever be a shinobi again?" With Tsunade saying, "Probably not," as she walked out of the room. Guy would start crying and say, "Sorry, Lee, I should have stepped in and helped earlier." With Lee saying, "Don't worry about it, Guy Sensei. I'll be fine." 1 hour mark. Make sure to hydrate with me. Sorry, but my throat's getting chapped. I needed to hydrate. So, basically, we see Lee once again fighting, but out of his back pocket he pulls sake. He'd say wait to Kimimaro, who would actually stop. Kimimaro would say, "Getting one last drink off before I kill you?" With Lee saying, "No, just wait and see." As he sips the sake, his face goes blood red, and his body starts moving like a noodle. He'd start talking like an idiot and acting like one too. Hey, get over here!" As he appears next to Kimimaro, kicking him back to where he was standing, and then appearing back there, kicking him once more. As he appears above him, he'd say, "Leaf Hurricane!" trying to kick him downwards with the Leaf Hurricane. But it would miss. Or not miss, but just not impact, as Kimimaro had made or removed the bones out of his arms to protect himself. Now things are getting interesting. The curse mark would start to spread, and he's in his first state curse mark state. That's a really hard thing to say. First form curse mark state, with the markings covering his entire body. Lee looked proper drunk, with Kimimaro being confused. Their fight would be weird. Instead of Lee being as aggressive as he was previously, his body is like a limp noodle, being able to dodge anything. When Lee's like, "Oh, I'm tired," as he falls over on the grass and starts snoring. Kimimaro would say, "Is he actually asleep?" as he walks over, pulling a blade out of his, basically out of his arm, and then trying to stab Lee. Says, "Ha! Tricked you!" as he kicked him. Saying, "Now let's," as he falls back on the ground, once again snoring. With Kimimaro saying, "Seriously?" as he tries poking Lee once again with his sharp arm-like sword. With Lee saying, "Tricked you again!" as he tried to stab him, but Kimimaro would this time dodge. Lee falling on the ground. Kimimaro would know not to fall for this again and would try poking at Lee and putting his arm up to make sure he's blocking, with Lee just dodging to the side. Now he's just staying on the ground. Kimimaro would start giving out a barrage of attacks to the ground, trying to hit Lee, with Lee dodging every single one. Lee would get up and say, "Now you're over with," as he would attack him. Once again, his tactics are completely different from the last 5 minutes. His entire fighting style keeps changing, and it's frustrating Kimimaro. "That's enough!" he shouts as his skin starts going pale and he grows a horn. He'd reach his hand into his back once again, as his previous spine sword has been broken. This time it's longer, almost twice the size, as he swings it at Lee, hitting him, teleporting, or what seems like it, appearing behind Lee, hitting him again, putting Lee in a decrepit state. Lee would basically sober up and know that he's done with. At least he bought Naruto time. As he's laying there on the ground, Kimimaro would bring down his spine sword, ready to finish him. Lee sees it getting all closer to his face, and as it's about to hit, the camera pans out. We see Naruto once again facing Sasuke. Sasuke, who's in a different state. He has his two-tomo blazing, his chakra reserves almost doubled, his physical body looking stronger. As they start talking, Naruto would say, "Sasuke, come back to the leaf, this is foolish." With Sasuke saying, "You never gave me this much power, If I knew power was so easy to obtain, I would have gone with Orochimaru 6 years ago. With this power, I can finally kill Itachi. But first, I'll kill you, Naruto. Naruto would look at him and say, no, Sasuke, even if I have to break every single bone in your body, you will come with me back to the leaf. We will return. Their battle would start. Naruto would quickly be put at a disadvantage, with Sasuke giving out slanders. You're a monster. Everyone hates you for this reason. The only reason the Hyuga clan likes you is because they want to use you as a weapon, making him all the angrier. Kurama would point this out, but Naruto wouldn't care. He just wants chakra. He's going to break every single bone in this ignorant boy's body. Naruto would get a lot more aggressive, growing one tail, and then two. This didn't happen in canon because he didn't have as much access to Kurama's chakra as he did. Whatever. He starts teleporting around Sasuke, beating him, but Sasuke would eventually get back up. Adapting to Naruto's speed, they'd be able to throw hands more evenly, until Sasuke says, now I'll kill you, as he fires up a Chidori. But instead of normal lightning, it's black. He says, this I'll call the Dark Chidori, as he charges at Naruto. Naruto would see this coming and say, whatever, as he grows yet another tail out of rage, smacking Sasuke to the side. But this had a physical drawback on Naruto's body. His body wasn't supposed to take this much, especially after the beating he took from Kimimaro. He falls to the ground, losing an entire 2 tails, feeling his body exhausted. Sasuke appears next to him and kicks him up, saying, get up and fight me! As they once again go at it in taijutsu. They'd eventually get worn down, with Naruto and Sasuke both firing up their signature jutsu. Sasuke would fire up a Chidori, and Naruto would fire up a sloppy Rasengan. You could see it misforming. And as it impacted with Sasuke's Chidori, it kind of exploded, sending both of them back, hitting opposite sides of the waterfall against the stone statues of Madara and Hashirama. At this, they'd both get knocked out of their states. They're tired. They're hurt. But they won't stop fighting. Even now, they continue fighting, hitting each other, beating each other. Both of them would be to their last limb. When they'd stand up, Sasuke would say, I'll finish you, as he fires up his last Chidori, his arm twitching in the process. He can't handle this. Naruto firing up Rasengan, and them charging at each other. As they get to each other, Naruto has a flashback. The day before saving Hinata, he walked past Sasuke at the pier. They could have been friends. He could have prevented Sasuke from going down this route, and Sasuke seeing the road to power ahead of him. He's going to unlock his 3-tomo Sharingan. He's going to train Orochimaru. He's going to kill Itachi. Naruto starts depowering his Rasengan as Sasuke's Chidori starts going stronger. As an almost disappeared Rasengan collides with the uber-powered Chidori, a giant explosion would occur. One side black, one white, with their hands barely touching, creating a light in the middle. This would make a giant yin-yang symbol as it blows both of them aside. As the light dissipates, we see Sasuke standing over Naruto, his hand pulling out of Naruto's chest. Naruto was able to negate the entirety of the Rasengan before he ripped Sasuke's arm clean off and potentially killing him. Sasuke burying his Chidori into Naruto's heart and pulling it out. His Sharingan would evolve once more, saying, I did it! I have the ultimate power, as he looks into the water, saying, now Naruto, you're dead. I killed my best friend Itachi. I gained power, he shouts out. As he remembers back to the first night when his parents were killed. You must gain bonds and kill your best friend if you ever wish to defeat me, Itachi would have told him. For the interaction between Itachi and Naruto would have never happened. Now, Sasuke leaps off in the direction Kimimaro told him to move. He goes to Orochimaru's hideout. Now appears one Mike guy who had just returned from his mission. Make sure that Naruto and Shikamaru were successful on their mission. They didn't know there were 4 Sound Shinobi. They thought it was Sasuke and maybe 1, since there was only 1 reported rogue ninja being there, being Kabuto. So they were sure this team of 5 could handle it. But no. Guy would arrive to see a beaten and battered Naruto with a hole in his heart. How's he still alive? Guy would think as Naruto's heart is regenerating in front of him. Kurama's chakra swirling around it, rushing to heal him. As Guy got closer, the chakra pushed him away so that he couldn't interfere with the healing process. He'd waited out, but we once again go back. We see Choji being passed by Guy as he is sitting there against a tree, victorious and somehow not dead. He's still hurt, but turns out he was saved. He was saved by someone. Someone who is Guy. He had barely been able to defeat the big guy by bursting his chakra one more time, but he fell once more. Guy would have given one last soldier pill and told him that the medical unit's on his way. Choji would start fading out of consciousness as he falls into a hammock. The medical unit is there to help him, but he knows it's over. The red pill always means it's over. Next is Neji. Neji would see the final arrow coming closer to his face as a puppet grabs it, throwing it back. No, that's not a puppet. That's a wind stream. A wind stream throws it back, and a puppet hits his opponent to the ground, as another puppet stands in front of Neji to make sure that he doesn't get hurt. This is 2 people from the Sound duo, and another sand would come crashing down, killing the 2 twins. Sand burial. Kiba would say, guys from the sand, as they'd immediately start leaving, with some medical corps shinobi arriving to help Kiba and Ikamaru. Kiba obviously saying, help Akamaru first, as he spits out blood. He has to survive this. Next, we see the 3 sand shinobi splitting up. First, we see Kankuro appear. First, we see Kankuro stay behind with the 2 that they found with the medical shinobi. He is to guard them and take them back. He would make sure that everyone was okay, while Tamari and Gaara would go ahead. Gaara and Tamari would once again split up, with Tamari finding one shadow user almost dying to one giant shadow as she pulls out her fan blade, throwing a wind gust towards these 3 giants she sees. She had been enhancing her eyesight to try and find him, so she could already see them. He'd explained that the girl has bells all over the place. Those bells cause Genju to use your wind to destroy all of them, as Tamari would do within seconds, saying, "Oh, you're not the fight I remember from the tuning exams. How could you give up this easy to this low-level shinobi?" As she'd quickly dispose of the sound genin, or the sound shinobi. Gaara would appear as Lee sees the spinal cord coming closer and closer to his face. Sand would stop it. Lee would be surprised. Sand? He only knows one person as Sand, as he snaps his neck to the side, saying, "You, Gaara of the Sand." Kimimaru would say, "Who is this?" in his now crazed second form curse mark state. And we'd pan back to Kankuro saying, "We're from the Sand," panning to Tamari. "We're now allies of the Leaf," as we pan back to Gaara. "And we are to protect this shinobi and bring Sasuke Uchiha back." An epic fight would occur between Gaara, Kimimaru, with Lee backing Gaara. Eventually, Kimimaru would pull out his last card. He's down in the dumps and he has to help Lord Orochimaru, as his past is thrown on screen. we see that Kimimaro didn't have the best life. Not the best life in the least. He had been outcast from his clan for having this Kekkei, being kept in a dungeon. But when the blood mist erupted, Orochimaru was there. He was alone in a cage, the rest of his clan dead. Him soon following, since there was no one to bring him food. When Orochimaru was the shining hand that brought him out of the slums. You see him training under Orochimaru to eventually become his vessel, but shortly after falling sick. His Kekkei cursed his body to destroy itself, using vitamins from every point to basically regrow his bones. This was not good for him, as he just erupts all his bones into the earth, throwing them out everywhere, with Gaara shouting, "Sand burial!" being able to protect both him and Lee, but barely. As the sand dissipates and the bones are clear, they see a corpse standing with his body of pure bone. Kimimaro had sacrificed himself to try and take out his enemy. No, Lord Orochimaru's enemy. Now, everyone is returned to the leaf. Everyone is worried. Naruto is in critical condition. He would finally awaken to Jiraiya saying, "Hey kid, you might not have gotten that Sasuke kid to come back, but I could help you. Come with me. Train. We'll look for Sasuke in the meantime, and if we find him, we'll force him to come back." Naruto would look at his hand and say, "That was my first failure. I'll return to the Hyuga compound, and then I'll come with you, Privy Sage." As he says yes, he would leap away and say, "Meet me at the North Gate," as Naruto would make his way out of the hospital. Still limping, he makes his way to the Hyuga compound, but before he can, at the door of the hospital stood what remained of the Rookie Nine. He'd look at them and then look at a hallway where Shikamaru was patiently sitting. Naruto would say, "Where are they?" Shikamaru would say that Kiba's in critical condition. Really critical condition. He might die. And Choji, he took the red pill. He sacrificed himself for that Uchiha scum. As he easily got frustrated by Sasuke's methods, and Naruto saying, "Don't worry, I'll bring him back, and he will be punished for what he did." Shikamaru would sit patiently. Naruto would say, "Wish them the best for me. I need to go." Shikamaru would once again rage, throwing something at Naruto. "And where do you think you're going? You just had a hole in your heart. And now you're leaving our allies who are just in just as bad condition. They don't have the Nine Tails. They can't heal from anything." With everyone else standing there. Hinata, Ino, Sakura. Looking, that was a little aggressive, as Naruto said, "I have to go. I'll bring him back, even if I have to break every bone in his useless body." But as he said that, he gets a slap from the side, coming from Sakura. "Don't you call Sasuke useless? He's better than you. You should have been the one to leave." But as she says this, she gets hit by something. An air palm coming from Hinata. Hinata was never one to learn things like the air palm. But now that she got it down, she wasn't afraid to use it. She'd say that it's not Naruto's fault that he was gone. If you're so strong, why didn't you stop him? Huh, Sakura? Maybe you're the useless one. As she'd grab Naruto by the arm, trying to make her leave. Naruto'd say, "Hinata, that was a little much," as she looks to Sakura, but saying, "She shouldn't have hit you like that, but you are useless. You're not one to talk. I'll bring Sasuke back, and I'll kill him for what he did." Sakura would look shocked at herself. What just happened? As she starts realizing that Sasuke betrayed the Leaf, and she almost caused everyone in her classes deaths. Neji, who had barely waken up, would say, "Nice going, Miss Hinata," as he'd fall to his knees being grabbed by Hinata. Naruto and Hinata would help him back to his room, saying that he shouldn't be out here. Kiba and Akamaru and Choji are all in critical condition. Even he's just a little better off. He told them not to worry about him, but what's gonna happen? Naruto would look at his hand and said, I'm going training with Master Jiraiya. For Hinata, I'm gonna ask Lady Tsunade to train you, but I need to go. I'll find Sasuke and I'll bring him back. Hinata'd say, okay, let's go then. As they leap off to the Hokage's office, where they'd surprisingly find Jiraiya. Oh, Naruto, Jiraiya'd say, I thought you'd still take a while. You been to the Hyuga compound yet? As he'd shake his head. He'd go up to Tsunade saying, before we go, Granny Tsunade, I need you to train Hinata. Tsunade would look at him confused like, and why should I? As he wanted to say something, Hinata would interrupt. No, Naruto, I don't need you asking for me. I've been shy for long enough. Lady Tsunade, please train me. I promise I will be the best kunoichi I can. Tsunade would say that, where were you when all this went down? Why weren't you with them? Why didn't you help them come back? As she'd say, I know. I should have thought this through more. Kakashi could handle an escort mission on his own. He didn't need my help. I could have spoken up, but Lady Tsunade, I promise, if you help me, I will become the greatest kunoichi in this village. Tsunade would smile. That's what I like to hear, kid. As she'd accept Hinata as her student. Jiraiya would nudge at Naruto as he'd lift his shoulders and start turning. But as his semi-injured body would be tackled back to the ground in a massive kiss from Hinata, saying, if you're gonna leave, Naruto, I'll be strong. I'll be waiting for you. As she plants one last kiss on his lips. Naruto would stand up and say, you were always aggressive when it came to kissing, and always kissed first. As he gave off a sinister smile. Whatever. So, what would end up happening is Naruto would prepare to leave. He'd gather all the things from the Hyuga compound where he'd lived the last few months, or the last few years at that, and he'd set out. Well, at the same time, Hinata would start her training with Lady Tsunade.
Subscribe for more.
Yada yada does it.